January 6th insurrection, by the way, as thousands of people died of COVID every day across the country. Marjorie Taylor Greene boasted about her total disregard for others' health and safety.
I refuse to wear a mask. And Chris, I have to tell you something else. I'm not vaccinated. And I will be standing strong, standing up for the people across this country that refuse to get vaccinated.
Eventually, it caught up with her financially. As The Hill notes, House rules fine lawmakers $500 for their first infraction with the mask mandate and $2,500 for subsequent breaches. The second one really hurts, to be withdrawn from their yearly pay. Greene racked up more than $100,000 in fines. That's a lot of times refusing to wear a mask. That is also well over half of her annual salary. So the Congresswoman and two of her colleagues, Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Ralph Norman of South Carolina, brought a lawsuit, of course they did, against then Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other House staffers. They argued basically that the fines amounted to an illegal reduction of their salary. They lost in front of the district court, again at the U.S. Court of Appeals, and now the Supreme Court has refused the case altogether, allowing the lower court ruling to stand. So, as it turns out, the rules apply to you too, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Mask up or pay up.
Yeah, we also, for everybody who loved to go around, all the Republicans who loved to talk about how mask mandates were unconstitutional, it appears that these mandates not only can be upheld, but you can also be fined for it if you don't follow the rules. So Marjorie Taylor Greene loses $100,000 of her $174,000 salary, and it could not have happened to a better person. That is terrific news for justice. I like when Marjorie Taylor Greene gets in trouble. Good morning, Facts. Did she not know that mask was her friend? Did wonder. Look, the history will not be kind to those. I understand people not being vaccinated or not wearing masks, whatever. If you didn't do that, fine. But history will not be kind to the people who made it their whole identity, where they would just they're like, I'll never wear a mask, and just refused all the time. Those are the same people right now that are saying masks don't work and vaccines don't work because they don't understand how science works. And that when they get this study of how well masks worked, and they're like, oh, well, because it didn't work all the time and some masks didn't work hardly at all, that just masks in general don't work. So it's great to have Marjorie Taylor Greene take an L for the QAnon COVID crowd. Good morning. All right, that was just a little bit of red meat for me. Yesterday, Jim Biden decided to go in and testify before the House Congressional Committee. I think it's congressional, whoever it is. Fortunately for us in Arizona, we've got Andy Biggs in the room. And Andy Biggs went on... Jesus. Oh, this is Fox. He just put on his own patriotic background. Andy Biggs put up this tweet with this video. The tweet, he said that Jim Biden denied many things yesterday, but our witness and sources paint a different picture. Jim Biden was actually working for China's CEFC and trying to get them to project deals trying to get them project deals in the United States. But here's what Andy Biggs decided to tell Fox News yesterday.
Didn't James Biden testify that that he always kept his professional life separate from Joe Biden? But he invoked Joe Biden's name and influence in business deals. His bio he gave out to business partners reads brother, campaign chair, finance chair of Joe Biden.
Yeah, he just says.
Yeah, that when you hand out your resume, what you do is you put your previous jobs on there. So on his resume that they're talking about here, it listed that he was the campaign finance chair for his brother, Joe Biden. Yeah, you can put that on a resume. Beta boy,
that's
not
true. I mean, he just denied everything, regardless of the fact there are, in the Politico article, you have 4 separate sources that claim that he used Joe Biden. You have additional witnesses that we've interviewed that claims he used Joe Biden's name.
Yeah.
But Jim Biden said, no, absolutely not. It was just an amazing performance. Quite frankly, as I sat there, you would hear Jim Biden say one thing and then contradict it within sometimes a matter of seconds. What he was doing, what Jim Biden was doing is he was actually working for the Chinese company, trying to get him to come on over here and do a bunch of projects. But the reality is...
Yeah, the nat gas...
Okay. You guys are going to be shocked as shit. But Andy Biggs is really fucking stupid, and Andy Biggs is really, really wrong. Or he's lying, and I'm going to guess he's lying. Notice he has to invoke China. That's super important, guys. When we talk about Joe Biden from the conservative angle, it's very important that we use the keyword China. That will immediately get the blood boiling inside of a MAGA. You say China and it just starts going. The blood gets going. So I decided to read the Politico article because in the background here, they are showing clip after quote from Ben Schreckinger. That's who wrote the political article. The article is called Biden's Brother Used His Name to Promote a Hospital Chain, Then It Collapsed. I would say that headline is a bit misleading, in that it makes it sound like Jim Biden was somehow part of a massive hospital chain that then collapsed. We're talking about a hospital chain called AmeriCorps. During the final years of Obama's administration, it says Jim Biden had cemented the former vice president's towering statue in the world of healthcare, where he made the fight against cancer a top federal priority, this was Joe Biden, and then a centerpiece of his legacy building efforts. For then 67-year-old Jim Biden, the third of the four Biden siblings, his ties to his older brother made up much of his pitch as he pursued deals that could help AmeriCorps make money from drug rehab, lab testing, and even cancer treatment. He is quoted as saying, "This would be a perfect platform to expose my brother's team to your protocol. Like what they do." Jim Biden wrote the CEO of Tampa area company that controlled licensing rights to an experimental cancer treatment at the that the hospital wanted to offer. This could provide a great opportunity for some real exposure. So there, Jim Biden, it appears, just saying like, hey, we're doing business together, but I may also be able to get you some exposure to my brother. There's no evidence that a meeting ever happened there. It just says Jim Biden invoked his brother's name and clout in the course of his work with AmeriCorps, which has since gone bankrupt. So, turns out with Jim Biden, he's been accused of saying he had a plan to give his brother equity in AmeriCorps and install him on the board. He then went through his business context and he was trying to get funding. AmeriCorps was in trouble. I don't remember how much they were in debt. I don't know if I've even seen that number. But they were in trouble and they needed outside funding. And that's where Jim Biden, that's what he was doing, right? He was essentially posing as a lobbyist or somebody that's connected who could get funding. So he offered to try and get funding for them. It never came through. He never got any funding. The funds were ejected and the business ultimately fell apart. Jim Biden didn't run AmeriCorps. This wasn't his business. This was a business that he was consulting with, and he wanted to secure funding, and then that would give him a board seat and ownership. None of this ever happened. So this entire enrichment scheme didn't even happen. So what you have House Republicans banking, or I guess coming out and bragging about this testimony, is that Jim Biden, it appears at least one time that we have on record, and apparently a few other times where people have just quoted him, said that like, hey, I'm going to talk to my brother and I've got some connections there. It turns out he didn't have connections, right? He didn't get the funding. He didn't get on the board. There was never a seat. What this story shows is that Jim Biden overpromised a bunch of stuff. And if he really did have his brother's help, do you think that funding would have fallen through? If Joe Biden was this person so connected and with such deep ties to China and Russia and Ukraine and all these foreign countries, this seemed to just be willing to give the Bidens money for no reason at all. Why did the funding fail? Why did this deal never go through? You think Joe Biden just did nothing? Joe Biden wanted to be part of this deal. He secretly had his brother running out there in front of him, like looking for business deals, and then just didn't get the funding. That's the accusation now. It's getting pretty ridiculous by the Republicans, and I enjoy it. But this then leads into Jim Jordan yesterday. This is Jim Jordan in front of. Let's see, let me get this. This was from CNN. I forget this field reporter's name, but catching up to Jim Jordan and talking to him about the 1023. So the 1023 is the form that the FBI had this 1023, and the 1023 was for Alexander Smirnov's testimony. The FBI, Department of Justice, had this form, and the House subcommittee was requesting it, and they kept telling him no, like this is not a something that we can rely on. The witness we have is not reliable. It's an FBI source, but I don't think they told him it was an FBI source at the beginning. Actually, it's an unreliable document. Eventually, they subpoenaed it. The courts ruled they had to give it to the House subcommittee. They got it. And when they were given this document, they were told then, like, hey, this guy's a liar. He's not telling the truth. This document should not be relied on. And they went out to every news outlet. And you can, if you go to YouTube, you can find compilations of this. But just Republican after Republican after Republicans talking about a $5 million bribe from a vetted, trusted, highly trusted, and deeply sourced FBI informant. That wasn't true. Just none of that was true. So here is Manu Raju from CNN just confronting Jim Jordan as he left wherever the hell they were yesterday.
About the president's involvement in a bribery scheme now that Alexander Smirnov is proven to have made it up, and it was based off Russian intelligence.
Doesn't change the four fundamental facts. Hunter Biden was put on the board of Burisma, gets paid $1 million a year. Fact number two, he's not qualified to be on the board. He said so himself in an interview, I don't know, with you or some network. Fact number three, Zolochevsky and Pizarski, the two executives at Burisma, specifically asked Hunter Biden, can you weigh in with D.C. and help us deal with the pressure we are facing from the prosecutor? Fact number four, Joe Biden, then he gets called. Hunter Biden calls his dad, according to Devin Archer, Hunter Biden's business partner. Fact number four, Joe Biden then goes to Ukraine 3 days later and conditions the release of the money, American tax money, on the firing of the prosecutor who was applying the pressure to the company that Hunter Biden sat on the board of.
You said the 1023 is the most corroborating piece of information you have.
It corroborates, but it doesn't change those fundamental facts. So now
but it's not true.
Well, so okay, so it's the FBI told us that this source was so 14.
Yeah. He says it's not at the end of that. He says that you said this 1023I was what you were relying on for corroboration, right? Like this 1023 is how they corroborated this story. But then it turns out it's not true. And so you have Jim Jordan out there laying out this whole story. And you'll notice the 4 key points. I've got 2 more clips and then I'll address that. But there's the 4 key points that he lays out every time. It's how Jim Jordan talks. Every time Jim Jordan is trotted out to defend Donald Trump or prosecute somebody, he'll always do this. He'll have 3 or 4 key points and he'll just keep repeating those 4 points over and over and over. And he'll say the same thing. It doesn't change these 4 facts. But obviously, those 4 facts aren't facts. If the place that you got the facts from is this document, and the document is from a person who's lying, those are no longer real facts. Those are things that a liar told you, right? Like, I have a hard time believing that Republicans are that dumb. I really do. To anybody listening, anybody in office, any of them, I have a hard time believing anybody is actually that dumb. Now this is another reporter confronting him, and just again notice the pattern from Jim Jordan every time he's stopped. It's clear that Jim Jordan is the person they've selected to go out and be the spokesperson. Like, no more James Comer out there fucking things up. They've called in the big boys. Felice and I were talking the other day. I said, like, they keep rolling out Jim Comer and Andy Biggs and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Nobody's taking this serious. Like, the people that have some sort of authority or who can speak authoritatively are not even involved in this. But here comes Jim Jordan. He's like, oh, I got to lie about something? Count me in.
I think you should ask the FBI why they were so reluctant. They told us if we don't, when we wanted to see the 1020, said this could jeopardize national security, the safety of this confidential human source. You can't know his name. They didn't want to show it to us. Then they finally did. I mean, this is a guy they paid, I think, since 2010. So 14 years they've been paying this guy. And he's a trusted source. And now we find out. Plus, I think there's sort of when Christopher Steele lied to the FBI about President Trump, he gets paid more. When Smirnoff lies to the FBI about President Biden, no, he gets indicted. I mean, go figure. So it doesn't change the fundamental facts.
It doesn't change the facts. It does change the facts. Those are no longer facts. Those are not true.
The four things I just said, they're absolutely true.
All right. So a couple of things there. One, again, makes the claim that these are facts, but they're not facts because it's untrue. I like that he referenced Christopher Steele there, and I like the whataboutism. It's a good pattern for MAGA. It's one of their favorite things to do is just whataboutism. Let's talk about the difference between who Christopher Steele and who Smirnoff is. Like, Smirnoff is an informant with connections to Russia who we now know was just being fed information from Russia. And once we knew that, we stopped relying on him as an informant. Christopher Steele wasn't an informant. Christopher Steele was somebody that got paid by the RNC and the DNC to do opposition research. And then that Steele dossier was used as part of a FISA warrant application. These aren't even remotely similar, but Jim Jordan, who's so good at making things sound like it's an unjust system, just runs with that. Like, these are completely different scenarios. They're not even remotely the same. And then again, he says, what about my 4 facts at the end? And I'll give you one more chance to hear those 4 facts because we all love hearing Jim Jordan speak. This is Jim Jordan later on Fox. Good to see Fox doing Maria Bartiromo. Is that how you say it? Bartiromo? Whatever.
It seems, want to just detail for us what you believe is the most egregious here and what is the evidence that you feel that Joe Biden, in fact, did participate in all of this. I mean, it seems pretty obvious, but you still have the Democrats, including Democrats in Congress, your colleagues, who say there's nothing here, particularly after the Smirnoff indictment.
The Smirnoff indictment doesn't change 4 fundamental facts relative to Burisma. Hunter Biden gets put on the board, gets paid a lot of money, $1 million.
Okay, let's go through these 4 facts. Hunter Biden gets put on the board of Burisma, gets paid millions of dollars. Okay, is that a crime? No. So I don't know why that's necessary or what that's going to prove, but he probably has a story.
Here, fact 2, Hunter Biden's not qualified to be on the board. He said it himself when he was doing an interview, I think, with ABC News.
Again, fact 2. This I disagree with. I don't know the quote he's talking about saying he's not qualified to be on the board. If Hunter Biden said it, I'll take Hunter Biden at his word. I haven't heard that quote, but we know that he was on the board of Amtrak before he went to Burisma. That actually makes perfect sense. So 0 for 2.
Fact number 3, the executives at Burisma asked Hunter Biden to weigh in because they're under pressure from the prosecutor. Fact number 4, Joe Biden.
Okay. Fact number 3, executives at Burisma asked Hunter Biden for help. Not a crime. Certainly not a crime by Joe Biden. Certainly not a crime by Hunter Biden. Executives at Burisma asked for help. And again, please remember that this part of the argument is coming from that 1021. It's the same thing, right? Like, we've already debunked that, but he's using it. So 3 pieces of evidence, the 4 material facts that he says it doesn't change, 3 pieces of evidence, not only exonerate Joe Biden, but don't even allege a crime.
And goes to Kyiv and fires the prosecutor, and he does so by conditioning the release of our tax money on the firing of the prosecutor, applying the pressure to the company his son sat on the board of and made $1 million a year from. Those are facts that do not change, and it's
Yeah, those are kind of facts. But what was Joe Biden pressuring them for? They were not investigating. They weren't doing investigations. And as soon as a new prosecutor came in who was going to do investigations, the owners of Burisma went back to Russia. They fled to Russia. This entire story, we've already done this Ukraine thing. This was already covered in President Trump's first impeachment We already covered what did and did not happen in Ukraine. And this is one that didn't happen. And they tried this. Like, it's almost, if I was a Republican, I would be upset with the laziness. They're using things that were debunked 4 or 5 years ago. They're not even alleging a crime here. So far, all they've really done is shown that Jim Biden was willing to use his brother's name and that Hunter Biden sat on the board of Burisma. That's like, none of that is a crime. And certainly none of that is a crime that tracks back to Joe Biden. And I'm playing these in full context. I'm giving Jim Jordan the opportunity to make his argument. That's the argument, folks. Like, that's what the House GOP has decided to try and impeach Joe Biden on. Those 4 things, none of which are a crime, none of which are even a problem, frankly. None of them reek of nepotism. Nothing actually seemed to happen here. Joe Biden didn't seem to pull a single solitary string. So if I was Jim Jordan, maybe I wouldn't have had them trot me out to do this. I wouldn't want to be the person responsible for trying to spin this messaging here. This is from, what do we got here? This was from CNN last night. The DOJ warned that Smirnov's word might not be credible, but that's not the only red flag the House GOP ignored to open their impeachment inquiry into Biden. What else did they do?
They tried mightily not to turn over the Form 1023. They were clearly looking at the credibility of Mr. Smirnov. David Weiss, who's brought these charges, is a Trump appointee. He was the Trump U.S. attorney and continued in his role to look at Hunter Biden. There's a reason that we don't bandy these forms like the 1023 around. I know, because when I worked on the first impeachment, getting documents out of DOJ is like pulling teeth, Jim, with reason. They warned that this was not a credible document. The fault here lies squarely with those who were determined to impeach, even in the absence of any evidence of wrongdoing. Hunter Biden is not a government official. He's not subject to impeachment. James Biden, the president's brother, is not a government official. Uniform evidence. CNN has reported that all 8 top witnesses have said Joe Biden did nothing wrong. So to open an inquiry on this record, to push forward as they've done, is reckless. And that's what happens. You get tripped up this way when you don't have a basis to investigate, yet you forge ahead.
Yeah. Now we have, let me get to Jen real quick. Cover that. Now we have to decide what we do with Republicans. Now we have to decide what we do. Like, can we allow an impeachment inquiry coming from people who are just repeating Russian propaganda? Like, we now know that they knew this was Russian propaganda, that it was fed by Russian sources through somebody that they already knew was lying, and yet they keep pushing forward with this. They keep using this as their source. This is their only source, guys. This is the only thing they have. This is all of their evidence. The entirety of their evidence rests on the idea that this person was telling the truth, and this person is not telling the truth. And as they pointed out in that clip, there's 8 other witnesses that have come forth and testified, and they've all said the same thing as well. Joe Biden wasn't involved in any of this. Oh, I guess I had somebody in the box with me and I didn't know. Did he leave? Sorry. I don't think it ever pulled up in the box. I saw a warning that said timed out, but I didn't see it on my end. So I figured you tried to bring somebody up. I was unaware of that. Jen, will you watch for Danielle as well? Pull this up. All right. We'll skip that one. Here it is. Sorry about that. So this was from Raw's story yesterday. This just kind of addresses that. Like, if you want to look this up, it's titled "Kremlin and GOP in Plot to Tear Down Biden is Scandal of Historic Proportions." This is from David Weiss. Special Counsel David Weiss's allegation that a former FBI informant was fed anti-Biden propaganda from the Kremlin and laundered it to congressional Republicans who then used it to launch an impeachment investigation into President Joe Biden is a scandal of historic proportions, says former Republican strategist Tim Miller. This is now coming from inside the House of Representatives, inside the Republican conference within the House of Representatives, said Miller, calling it an unprecedented and really historic kind of moment. What we have here is an impeachment inquiry. We've not had that many of those. An impeachment investigation going against the President of the United States premised on totally false information that allegedly was sourced from Russian intelligence that was sourced from our foe. The premise of the House Republicans' impeachment investigation was based on, frankly, kind of preposterous information, like this notion that Joe Biden took $5 million and had some web of bank accounts that were so complex that it would take 10 years to unravel. That was one of Smirnoff's claims. Politico reported Tuesday evening we covered that. Miller continued, like, it's kind of laughable at the face, right? Like this notion that the American CIA could not have uncovered this, but that Republican U.S. reps Elise Stefanik and Byron Donalds could. You know, it's a preposterous accusation. Miller blasted Republicans in the House for pushing this false information about the sitting president and become tools in a foreign power in a foe's effort to interfere in our elections, to tear down the sitting president of the United States, to prop up his rival. And as you know, this is a scandal of historic proportions. I apologize for all the reading, but there was no video of this. I'd just like to put it in context. It's akin to, imagine if during the Cold War in the 80s, the Soviets had trumped up some fake information about Ronald Reagan being on the take, and the Democratic Speaker Tip O'Neill and Democratic House had opened up an inquiry, an investigation into it. That would be something it would be echoing, and you know, it would be talked about in conservative media 40, 50 years later. And so the fact that this is happening now, that there's one party that is so complicit in this, I don't think the significance is something that can be understated. I thought, again, former political strategist for the Bush administration, not somebody you'd probably look to as a beacon of doing things the right way. But this is so embarrassing that everybody's coming out of the woodworks. Like, nobody's afraid to even call this shit out because it's so obviously dumb. Democrats are laughing. Republicans can't, like, the Republican Senate is like, you have no shot, guys. You have no shot. But they have to push through this because they need to keep deflecting away from the fact that it seems twice a day now there's a new update in one of Donald Trump's cases. It seems every day. That's what they're gonna do. Yes, I am unsupervised today. If you're up, please request. And I do, and I assume I'm gonna have a guest at some point. Any questions on any of that? I was in a live last night, which was spirited, and I thought about it. I was up real early this morning, and I sat in my bed and I do this thing, like I just like replay arguments. I like to do that. Believe it or not, I like arguing a little bit. But I was thinking of how difficult it is currently to try and have actual debate, especially on TikTok. The entire debate seems to get stuck in a rut where, like, we can't even agree on what words mean, what the facts of things are, like what's real and what's not. I don't know, like, it's almost impossible to have a debate about any particular issue right now because the Republicans are just running on 100% lies. I don't, like, tell me I'm wrong if there's a Republican in here. Tell me what you guys are running on that isn't a lie. You can tell me you're running on the border, but, like, yeah, I know there's a problem with the border, but the lie is that you guys are going to do anything about it. You're not willing to help. You guys aren't willing to get out there and pass a bill. Good morning, boyfriend Jay. Good morning. It's Shocker House. Hey, when you changed your name, I always forget. Hello, neighbor. Do we have any Republicans here today? If we do, hop in the box before Danielle gets here. By the way, what did I say? Did I say diva? Sorry about that, Deannie. I don't know what I said. It's just me. I am still participating in CoinCot. Felice is as well, but she's not here, as you can see. So gifts will be turned off. This is in solidarity with BIPOC creators. If you do feel inclined to send a gift, the Cash App is right there and the Venmo's there, and I'll read messages. Looks like I missed one today already. You can send in hypothetical F Mary Unalives. Mariana, thank you for the donation. That was very generous. And Michelle says, how do you keep your beard perfectly scruffy? I trim my beard once a week. That's what I do. It's once a week. And my facial hair is also kind of curly, so it doesn't stick out so much. I don't have to shave as often to make it appear that it's not sticking out. They want there to be chaos because that's what Trump wants. Yeah, Trump thrives in chaos, but I think more importantly, he wants like interference. He wants people to go out there and talk about how great he is and how unfair everything else is, and how Joe Biden is corrupt, and accuse Joe Biden of all the crimes that Donald Trump is actually doing, which is so many. It's so many crimes. It's so many crimes. That was one of the frustrations last night in having that debate, is that even when he does commit a crime, so even when the state of New York sues him for committing fraud, you can spend 2 hours talking to Republicans, and for 2 straight hours, they will continuously bring up that the bank was the true problem. It was the bank's fault. They should have caught Donald Trump committing fraud. I want you to recognize the Republican response to Donald Trump getting this fine is not that it's excessive. It's not that he didn't commit the crime, because again, the evidence is overwhelming. He committed the crime. This was the easiest case ever. It was over before it started. We just had to figure out damages. But now we're saying that, well, if you do commit a crime, what has to happen is the person that you perpetuate, like the person involved with you, in this case the bank that you committed fraud with, where you supplied them faulty banking records, if they either go along with it or don't catch it, then it's not a crime. That's what Kevin O'Leary is saying. That's what Patrick Bet-David is saying. That's what everybody in every business person in America that's standing with Donald Trump right now, that's what the old Chip the trucker, that's what he's saying. That's what all of you guys are saying, is that if 2 parties consent to commit a crime together, then it's okay. Or if you commit a crime and your victim is okay with it, it's not a crime. That's not how that works. If I rear end you at a stoplight, and we decide that that's okay, like the damage wasn't too bad, we go our separate ways, I've now committed a crime, and just because we agreed not to pay doesn't mean it's not a crime. And I know this because it happened. It happened to a friend of mine. He wound up getting a ticket. He got a ticket even though the 2 parties agreed like it was no big deal. You'll hear from Republicans them talking about victimless crime, and that how can you have a crime without a victim? There's plenty of victimless crimes. If you get a DUI and you didn't hit somebody, did you commit a crime? Absolutely, you committed a crime. Well, the banks. That's a good question. Why aren't the banks being prosecuted? And the true answer is, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if, and somebody else probably knows this. If you do, if anybody knows the answer to this question, and you're not just guessing, please come up and explain it to me. I don't know if there is a law on the books where the bank could be prosecuted for this. I legitimately don't know. I imagine that the shareholders might have a lawsuit if they wanted to. The bank has a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders to negotiate appropriate terms. I'd imagine shareholders could probably sue, but I don't know if that's a crime. Is my slushy still liquid? It's a little liquidy. It's just a iced coffee. Just fines, Julian. Okay, so same as Trump. But we have to remember, it's still a crime. Just because you don't go to jail doesn't mean it's not a crime. It's still a crime. Well, listen, the banks should have been prosecuted in 2008. I think that there was plenty of evidence that they broke the law repeatedly. And the ratings agencies should have all went to jail too, because they were complicit. They defrauded the American people. They defrauded our financial systems. There's wire fraud, bank fraud, like everything fraud. It's just all fraud. 2008 was bullshit. Okay. So, like I said, if anybody knows the answer to that in more depth, please come up. And if there's Republicans, while we're waiting for Danielle, please come up. I don't want to go through too much more. Let me check and just see where she's at. If she's going to make it still. She has a busy schedule. I know she has like multiple interviews today, so let me see. Sorry, actually, I can't pull it up on this phone. Jen, could you check my messages and just message Danielle and see if she has an ETA? Thank you. Where's Mom? I don't know where Mom is, but I know Mom is safe and but she's healthy, and I just don't remember what she had to do. I really can't remember. But I knew she wasn't going to be here today. Which is probably why I woke up at 4 a.m. in a panic that I wasn't prepared. And then I thought, well, I read a bunch of stuff last night. I watched a bunch of videos. And then I woke up. I'm up from 4 until, I was adding stuff up until we started. So 5 hours, and I got like 18 things. She's just way better at this than I am. That's the truth. I miss and love her. Well, she'll be happy to know. If you miss her, send her a message. She would love that. So yeah, you get the C team today. You get what you get. Did we finish that Raw story? I think we did. I'll play this clip. So I came across this. I don't actually know when this was. I don't know if this was recent or if this is an old one, but I'd never seen it, so I apologize in advance if you guys have seen this. But this is a State Representative Jim Lucas. He's a Republican in Indiana, obviously a state rep, so who cares? But having a debate with some teenage constituents. How do I fast forward through these things? We're going to have to wait until it plays all the way through the end. I hate YouTube Shorts on the... That's crazy. You can't fast forward on YouTube Shorts on the... All right, well, we're going to wait for like 30 more seconds. In the meantime, how are you guys? Bri Young, welcome. The JC team, that's right. By the way, while this is going, did any of you see... I swear to God, I am a boomer, but I swear to God, it won't let me like fast forward. Did you guys see Q-Top's new rap video? If you haven't, I wouldn't recommend it, but...
So, do you mean by carrying?
I'm carrying right now.
See, and...
Let me set this up. So this is Jim Lucas. They're talking about carrying, and does that make people feel safer? State rep in that, like, literally opens up his jacket and says to these girls who were there protesting, saying like, do something about these school shootings. He just like brandishes a firearm, pulls up, says, I'm carrying right now.
Nothing about that makes me feel safe, though. I'm saying nothing about someone carrying a gun makes me feel safe. It makes me feel threatened. Okay.
Why do you feel the need to carry that?
To be able to defend myself.
So you think when you come here that someone's going to
There are people.
intentionally hurt
Okay,
you.
look at the crime rate in Indiana or in Indianapolis. People get shot.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Oftentimes, more often by people that are multiply convicted on felony accounts. These are people that shouldn't have guns. The law says you cannot have a gun. The law is not so. The law didn't stop them the first time. The law didn't stop them the second, third, or fourth time. These are people that don't care about how many laws we put on the books.
So, sorry, that's hard to hear. Essentially, his answer is, rightfully, that young woman says, it doesn't make me feel more safe that you have your pew pew here. That doesn't make me feel more safe. In fact, it makes me feel less safe. And he says, well, those are just your feelings, right? Like, those are just your feelings. So let's talk about facts. So then he says, let's see. Yeah, Jen, would you DM her and just see if she has an ETA? Then he decides to bring the facts. And his facts are this, that multiple people that have been convicted of multiple felonies make up the vast majority of pew pew violence, like the vast majority, right? And he says the law didn't stop them the first time or the second time or the third time. These are people who don't care about how many laws we put on the books. Well, what else? The other thing that didn't stop them was you. Was the good guy with the pew pew. That also didn't stop them. So what the fuck are we talking about here, Republicans? You can't just point out that crimes are still happening and that the laws didn't work and then refuse to look at the laws. Because the current laws didn't work doesn't mean there's not laws that will work. That there's not things we can do to reduce that violence. And that's what these kids are up there begging this guy. Like, can you do something? He's like, yeah, I can carry. Look into my code. I can carry. That's unfortunately, that's going to be like the boomer message. That's how they will be remembered. They'll be remembered as the people who worshipped firearms to a point that they sacrificed the lives of thousands of children. Just a total and complete sacrifice. And look, I'm not necessarily somebody who thinks that guns need to be banned. Assault weapons, sure, make that argument. I think there's a good argument. But it's getting old. And Republicans, again, are doubling down on a losing message. People don't want to see this forever. People don't want to turn on the news and see this anymore. Every parent, if you have a child, I have a 4-year-old, and I live in a very red area where there is access to weaponry. Look, if you live in an area, let's say like where I live. My child's elementary school. I don't know how many kids are there. I'm going to say maybe 100 per grade. So K through 6, 700 people. Let's say there's 700. Or let's go to junior high. Make a more realistic age. Junior high. So then you've got probably 450. Yeah, is that about it? Maybe 800 to 1,000 kids, right? Well, if one of those kids is going through whatever they're going through, they decide they want to take action, they want to go and they want to harm the other kids at school. If they live in a district that is full of weapons versus a district that has no weapons, who's more likely, statistically, which of those two areas is your child less likely to be hurt in? And that's the thing that we have to address. There is nothing we can ever do to completely get rid of firearm violence, especially in this country where we're never going to get rid of all the firearms. But the arguments at this point are just nonsense arguments. It's a worship for firearms. They worship the very thing that is taking our kids' lives. They're worshiping something that in this country is overwhelmingly just used to either have a hobby or take a life. Or in my case, to have in my house because I've been broken into one time before and I think about it all the time and it makes me feel a little bit safer. But even then, I'm terrified. I'm always upgrading and changing my PIN. I don't ever want my child to be able to get into the safe to get it. So I've got that fear as well. But that's what's, this guy's standing in front of 2 kids and he's telling them don't worry. And they're like, well, you weren't fucking there, dude. You're here. There's violence all the time that happens, and the good guy with the pew pew almost never steps in. And every time they do, it's like a national hero. And frankly, like, yeah, if you step in, if you're the good guy with the pew pew and you step in, good. That's great. But every time a good guy with a pew pew steps in, the entirety of the right media is like, oh, look, we told you. It's like, yeah, but the rest of you were pussies, like, all the time. Like, most of you, even though you've got them, you're not stepping in. You're running. You're protecting your own life. Everybody likes to pretend that they would step in. I don't know if you guys have been in a situation where you thought you could be brave. I've never told this story because it's embarrassing, but like, I was in just outside of Sacramento, and I think it was I think I was up by Redding, actually, somewhere I was in Redding. That's where it was. I had come in that evening, just got off a plane, was headed to the hotel, got to the hotel. One of my coworkers was there. We're like, let's walk across the street. I just needed something to eat. It was like 2 a.m. So we just went to this gas station right across the street. And as I'm sitting there ready to pay, this guy steps in front of me with his hand in his jacket, and he starts yelling at the cashier to give me the money. And I was like, oh shit. And the cashier, he was amazing. He grabbed a snow shovel and he just came around and he hit the dude with a snow shovel. But me and my friend, like, we saw immediately when he got hit that he didn't actually have a pew pew, but we still ran, right? We took off. We freaked out and we ran out the door. We left that guy all by himself. The other guy ran too, and then they wound up catching him. But I've thought about that forever. Like, I ran out of there because I was afraid of my life. But like, in my head, I had always assumed when that happened, I would be so brave, and I wasn't. Like, that, just being honest, like, I regret what I did. I wish I would have stayed and helped, but I didn't. And I think that's the truth for most people. I think most people talk a tough game until it's their life that's on the line, and then they're not going to do anything. This good guy with a pew pew argument isn't working anymore. Just isn't working. Check these. Yeah, Jen, you can turn that off. Let me check this real quick. All right. Jack. What is Jack saying? Okay, and Chris. Hold on. All right. Chris says, F, Mary, unalive. David, Eric. Oh, the one and only. I always forget his name's Eric. David, Eric, Guerrilla Radio. I'm gonna marry David. We'd be fine. Guerrilla Radio's. We're gonna say banish. Banish. I don't want to. These are people that I actually know, so I don't want to wish actual harm on them. So banish. We'll do that. Guerrilla Radio's banished, and Eric and I are gonna have a really weird night of talking flat Earth and making sweet, sweet love. So there's that one. And then Jack says, we love you too. Felice is awesome, but so are you. Thank you, Jack. And also said, want to hear a joke about paper? Fair warning, it's terrible. I love that. I love that. I love a good dad joke. I don't remember what Mo put on Mo had a great dad joke yesterday. I don't remember what it is. Did you guys like that dad joke? That was a pretty good one. All right. Well, shit. I thought we were going to have a guest, and I don't know if we will, so I may not have enough material for the day, but we'll jump back into it. This was interesting. This is from, I don't know who the hell alter.net is. I don't know. This must have been something I found on Twitter. But it's from the New York Times, so it's just a repost here. But from the New York Times, saying Biden tears into Republicans. I've served with real racists, but these guys are worse. Maybe ask me anything. How deep is the average frog? Yeah, we'll get to that. All right. So before his White House career began, President Joe Biden spent 36 years in the U.S. Senate. Some of his former colleagues, and we've heard these names used to disparage him, Jesse Helms and Strom Thurmond, were actually open segregationists. It is important to remember that two things. Number one, it wasn't that long ago that we had open segregationists in the Senate and in Congress. That's important to remember. It's important to remember that while Joe Biden was in office, there were still segregationalists, right? That's most of our grandparents, some of our parents' age, like when they were just hanging out, people were openly segregationists. And this isn't something that was like closeted, right? So these are, if you could be an open segregationalist in the Senate, then chances are there are a lot of people that are just like you who voted you in. So I'm always reminded that, like, I was born in the 80s, mid 80s, and I was also raised in Utah. So my understanding of race in any sort of like race relations was limited. But even I and all of my white friends, I didn't know any of them that were segregationalists. But it wasn't that long before that. It was our parents and our grandparents. And I'm 100% certain that my grandmother was a segregationalist. I'm not sure about my grandfather. But the president recently said the current crop of Republicans in Congress are worse than them. The 1900s fuck off page. That's so mean. The New York Times reported that while addressing an audience at a fundraiser in California, Biden was particularly candid in his analysis of today's GOP, though he didn't attack any specific members by name. He said, "I served with real racists. I served with Strom Thurmond. I served with all these guys that have terrible records on race. But guess what? These guys are worse. These guys do not believe in basic democratic principles." Interesting fact here, Strom Thurmond holds the longest speaking filibuster of any legislation. He spoke for 14 hours and 18 minutes straight. And what was he filibustering? The Civil Rights Act of 1957. Keep in mind, the filibuster, which we've tried to get rid of, historically has been used to keep people down, right? It's been used and targeted at marginalized communities forever so that we didn't have progress. The president said that despite the terrible things Thurmond did during his career, he managed to redeem himself by the time he left office in 2003 at the age of 100. I was unaware of that fact. He left office at the age of 100. I also think redeeming yourself is tough. I understand anybody who would say there's nothing he could do to redeem himself. I think that would also be a fair opinion. Biden noted that his late former colleague had more African Americans on his staff than any other member in Congress, and that he voted to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. I'm not making him more than what he was, but my point is at least you could work with some of these guys. So Biden's comments, some of the comments that were cited by people there were in 2022 when Senator Tommy Tuberville, she's not here to correct me, it's Tuberville, blasted some Democrats' calls for reparations for slavery with this quote that I had forgotten about. Real fucking gem, Tommy Tuberville. Keep in mind, Tommy Tuberville, I always think about like how his former players must think about him when they see things like this. He was the coach at Alabama. The majority of his team was black. He said, again, Democrats calling for reparations for slavery, saying Democrats were pro-crime and that they think the people that do the crime are owed reparations. I can repeat that. Democrats are pro-crime and that they think the people that do the crime are owed reparations. Auburn, thank you, not Alabama. Thank you. Roll Tide. Fuck War Eagle. I apologize for that. Did we get that? This is a senator. This is a senator currently in the United States Senate. There you go, Republicans. That's a good one, right? This is, and by the way, this is also the senator that has basically blocked the military from giving out promotions for 3 straight years. So not only is he anti-military, he's also clearly anti-black. And what party is he in? The Republican Party? Again, not all Republicans are racists, but all racists are Republican. His comments were There you go, Republicans. That's a good one, right? This is, and by the way, this is also the senator that has basically blocked the military from giving out promotions for 3 straight years. So not only is he anti-military, he's also clearly anti-black. And what party is he in? The Republican Party? Again, not all Republicans are racists, but all racists are Republican. His comments were denounced by the NAACP. Denounce is probably not enough. He should have been, never mind. In the House, Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene, our favorite, was condemned for remarks that same year promoting the racist Great Replacement conspiracy theory that the mass unaliver in Buffalo also subscribed to. At a rally in Arizona, Greene said, Joe Biden's 5 million illegal aliens are on the verge of replacing you, replacing your jobs and replacing your kids in school and coming from all over the world. They're also replacing your culture. I live in Arizona. There's no culture here. The culture is, Jesus Christ, it's fucking hot. Let's find shade. And that's not great for America. And earlier this year, GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy did events alongside former Rep. Stephen King of Iowa, ahead of the Iowa caucuses. King had previously defended the terms white nationalist and white supremacist before getting voted out of office in 2020. Again, it was something along the lines, I don't have an exact quote, we could probably pull it, but something along the lines of like, what's wrong with being a white nationalist? What's wrong with that? I think that's a good point by Joe Biden. And frankly, I think that that's what the discourse needs to be. This group of MAGA Republicans, this 2024 class, whatever you want to call this group here, has made an entire party dumber, has made an entire party much more open to the ideas of racism and the Great Replacement theory. This is the most backwards Congress of our lifetimes. Guessing, depending on the age here, like I'm guessing most of us haven't lived, weren't around in the 50s, maybe a few of us. And for those of you who were around in the 50s, put your hands up. That is nothing to be ashamed of. We love you. And if you're here and you were born in the 50s, that means that you didn't stop growing. Well, hold on one second. I don't know why it does that. Sorry for the pause. It made me do the puzzle piece. Yeah, 60s too. I look, anybody over the age of 30 that still shows up and talks about like progressive politics, good for you. Because the rest of the people your age are just like, fuck this. I'm not learning anything new. And they're all just watching Fox News getting pissed off. Hell yeah, look at this. 67, 68. Where's the 69s? Where's the 69s? We got a 65. Look at this. 60s, 70s. Johnny, your hair looks like, your hair screams 70s. Sweet Pea's 85. 85 with the winner. Sweet Pea, 85. Winner. 84. There's 69. I don't know. Is that a lie? There was the first 69. GG, I win. 69. All right. Now there feels like there's too many 69s. Let me read comments real quick. Good job, Jen. Let's see. All right, we're good. Did I get them all? Yeah. A couple of messages asked me when I am debating Maud. That is still undetermined. I think I have an unread message from her in my TikTok messages. I messaged her at some point this morning just on how we would set it up. It will be one-on-one. I told her if she thought we needed a moderator, which is possible. Neither one of us are particularly keen on letting people finish arguments that we disagree with. So we may actually need a moderator because neither one of us are very good at that. And neither one of us are very good at backing down off of that. So I remember white drinking fountains. Holy shit. Listen, I know there's a lot of people that would be willing to moderate. I just, I think it's going to be better for me if I have somebody that is either conservative or a liberal that all the conservatives like. So I I don't know how that works out for you guys. Yeah, no host today. Felice has the day off. She's probably out just elevating all of the unhoused in her area. Pull up. All right. Yeah. All right. Here's a good one. This was from Luke Beasley. Damn it. Stop. This is a pastor. I don't know where he's at. This is, I don't know. This guy is wearing a vest. He has, I don't know if those are, I don't know if those are medals. I don't know enough about, people serving in the military to know if those are medals, but it's a vest and not a military outfit. If you like, can you put your medals on something that's not like your dress, military, what do you, apparel? I don't want to say apparel. What is it? I don't want to say costume or uniform. That's the one. About Nemo would be good. Yeah, I agree with that. Nemo would be good. I'm not sure how Maud feels about Nemo. That would be a good one. But can you do that? Your uniform? Are you allowed to put your medals on something that's not a uniform? Like an article of clothing? Barrister could be good. Fax could be good too. No, you're not. Okay, I didn't think so. So these are probably not really his medals, but here's what old Pastor whatever the fuck had to say to Luke Beasley.
It's actually calling the shots right now, and everything that I've researched is pointing toward that. Mike Lindell proved beyond a reasonable doubt that enough cheating went on in that election that it would have changed the outcome.
Obviously, many would say he didn't, but to move on from that, speaking of Mike Lindell, he's predicted multiple times that by this date, Trump will take back over as president, the military will bring him in. Does it not make you go, oh wait, maybe the claims he's been making about other things are also lies because he lied about this, or he at least falsely predicted something about this?
I don't believe Mike Lindell's got a bad bone in his body. He is a true Christian. I ministered for years. Why I'm here, why I built this truck, God came to me. And I'll hold my belief where God tells me to hold it. And it's a little too complicated for most people to even figure out what would happen if they overturned or found out that that was a fraud.
So, the cultism there, like it's on full display. If you trust somebody and you're like, why this guy has made a bunch of predictions in Mike Lindell and none of them are coming true. Have you ever thought like maybe he's lying? No. Why? He's a Christian. That's as easy as it is to be a right-wing grifter. Put up a big fucking cross, wear that around your neck, and then just talk about Jesus while you also, by the way, are advocating that like your political enemies be thrown in Azkaban or put in the gallows. And I did say Azkaban on purpose. I want you to know that. I know that for you guys that's not a real prison, but for me that's a very dangerous prison. And I think Luke Beasley and some of these other creators are doing a really good job. And I think that's a good debate strategy for any of you guys who are out doing TikTok. I also think it's a good strategy for talking to friends and family when you're talking about Donald Trump. Like Luke Beasley's done a really good job of just pointing out things that now were obviously lies and putting the onus back on them. Like, why don't you think it's a lie? All right, there's Danielle.
Good morning.
Hey, this is for any of you who don't know Danielle. I think it's In Bed with Danielle. Is that the handle? People won't be able to follow you.
For both TikTok and Instagram.
Okay, and you do what for work?
So I'm a clinical researcher and I'm also a sex therapist. So I do part-time clinical work and I do part-time research. And I'm an expert in abortion care and access in the U.S. So I contract and consult like at the state, local, federal level, travel across the U.S. doing abortion care and access work. So education sessions. I did an education session in Alabama. I know that's very hard to believe considering they're still very
Roll Tide
uneducated. We can talk about the questions that were asked in that, but so I get hired to go around and basically do education sessions on abortion care and access, talk about the implications of different bans, it depends on what they want me to talk about, but we can talk about anything from like the historical context of abortion all the way to like the aftermath of the overturn of Roe and what all of that means.
Yeah. We came in contact maybe 4 or 5 months ago. We've talked about doing some special events. And then you reached out to me yesterday and you just specifically wanted to talk about what's happening in Alabama. And I think most of the people here probably have like just a surface level understanding of what's happening in Alabama. For those that don't know, can you just explain what exactly we're seeing right now in Alabama?
Yeah, so Alabama kind of made a first of its kind ruling this week. There's been some what we call fetal personhood issues that have popped up, like different abortion bans. Alabama's abortion ban, for example, has what we call fetal personhood language. So what happened this week, to kind of understand the basics of the case, is IVF treatments are in vitro fertilization. It's a fertility treatment that helps couples who can't get pregnant get pregnant. The issue with fertility can be with a man or with a woman. In vitro fertilization helps with both of those things. What happens in vitro fertilization is they harvest a bunch of eggs, however many the person is able to produce. So they give you fertility meds, you put out a whole bunch of eggs, and then they harvest the eggs, they harvest sperm from the male, and then they put them all together in a dish, and then those embryos get frozen, right?
So as somebody who's done IVF, and for the men here, they don't harvest it. You do have to harvest that on your own. If you do. Just to be clear, if you're going to donate, don't expect that somebody will be harvesting for you. You still have to do that on your own.
Yeah, it's a very stereotypical go in this room, take this cup kind of situation. People. Yeah. So no one's helping you. So what they do is they take those embryos and they freeze them, and they're held at a storage facility. And the fertility clinic in Mobile, Alabama, their storage facility happened to be in a hospital. Somebody broke into that storage facility in the hospital. It's basically like a big kind of research lab holding area, right? The embryos are frozen. Someone broke in and they were trying to steal embryos. We aren't talking about Alabama. So what do you think happens when you...
Do they know why they were trying to steal embryos? Like, did they have a plan?
They may know. I don't know the answer. Okay. That answer may be findable.
That's an Alabama thing to do.
The next thing that's about to happen is also an Alabama thing to do. What I heard was it was an employee of the hospital. I don't know if that's true or not, but I heard that it was an employee of the hospital. So there's some reasonable expectation if it was an employee of the hospital, that they would be able to access different floors. I don't think they should have been able to access that room, because even when I contracted with hospitals, our ID badges would only let you in where you were supposed to be, right? Like you couldn't get onto the psych floor where I was working without an ID badge that could get you onto the psych floor. So this is a storage facility that houses all these frozen embryos. Someone broke into it. And what happens when you reach for a very heavily frozen object with your bare hands? It burns you because it's fucking frozen. So it's a very Alabama thing. So they reached in with their bare hands, grabbed these frozen embryos, and they immediately dropped them because they burned themselves. They got like freezer burn on their hand, basically. And those dropped embryos were then destroyed. They were no longer good anymore. So the 3 couples that were affected by that sued the hospital to say that we're owed property damages, and also, based on some of your fetal personhood language that occurs in several of our laws, we're going to file a wrongful death lawsuit as well. Because if you're saying these are children, then these are children, and this is a wrongful death lawsuit. So they were essentially kind of trying these fetal personhood laws. The lower court ruled embryos are not people, they're property. You do get damages. You're entitled to damages because this was damage to your property, but these are not human beings. So the wrongful death lawsuit is getting thrown out. That then got appealed to the Alabama Supreme Court, which is just like our Supreme Court, the highest court in Alabama. And the Alabama Supreme Court overturned that ruling and said embryos are people, not property. So you are not owed property damages, but you do win this wrongful death lawsuit. And the wording that they have in some of their, and of course I have it saved, but the wording that they have that they used in their decision, that the Supreme Court justices use in their decision, is really concerning. So Justice J. Mitchell said, unborn children are children without exception based on developmental age, physical location, or any other ancillary characteristics. So the original judge of the lower courts of Alabama, before we appealed it to the Supreme Court, said these are not children because they're not inside of a uterus. Now we can talk about how problematic it gets when you're like, oh no, it becomes a child when it's implanted in someone's uterus. But
also
they said...
Also, the fact that it can stay alive by being frozen and not have any new, like I know for myself, I cannot stay alive by being frozen and then you unthaw me 6 months later. It's
right.
One of the things about being a human. Yeah.
Wild. So what they're calling these are extra uterine children. So if a child is occurring outside the uterus, they say it's an extra uterine child. Any embryo that occurs outside the uterus is now an extra uterine child. So that would include your ectopic pregnancies. Those are extra uterine. That includes all IVF. And the other, that's kind of a pain in the ass. I hate that they said that, right? But there's also, I'm trying to find his actual quote where he used the Bible. Because they did use the Bible to cite.
Good. I was going to make sure the Bible was in there. That's important with all legislation, is that the Bible is sourced.
Of course. I'm trying to scroll through his decision to find where he cited Jeremiah 1:5, which says that's the one that says I knew you before you were in the womb, blah, blah, blah. And basically said we know that children are children because God says that they are. And the other point that he made, which of course now I'm trying to scan to find this, but the other point that he made was that you cannot, and if you go back and you look, I did a video about this a couple days ago, so I do say the quote in the video, but he said that you cannot, all life is made in the image of God, a holy God, and you cannot destroy that life. Here it is. Right. Yeah. The theologically based view of the sanctity of life adopted by the people of Alabama encompasses the following. God made every person in his image. Each person, therefore, has a value that far exceeds the ability of human beings to calculate. And human life cannot be wrongfully destroyed. This part's very important. Human life cannot be wrongfully destroyed without incurring the wrath of a holy God who views the destruction of his image as an affront to himself. Jesus. And then he said, even before birth, all human beings bear the image of God and their lives cannot be destroyed without effacing his glory. If you can't destroy it, that means you can't destroy embryos. So
now, I assume they brought in God and compared the image of God and an embryo to make sure they were in the same image. Of course. I think this is one of these things Christians do that drive, despite the fact that their religion's in there, that's bad enough. But then they cite a scripture that's before I formed you in the womb, I knew you before you were born, I sanctified you. And then the next part is, and I ordained you a prophet to the nations. He was talking to one specific person here. That, right. And that's what we're using now. A partial interpretation of a Bible verse, and suddenly now, I have 2 embryos. So I was talking to my ex about this last night. Does this mean that you are forced to continue to pay? Am I in Alabama? I'd probably be either forced to continue to pay for the embryo, or have the baby, or do some sort of surrogacy, right?
So that's kind of what has happened now. So I work in Alabama. I'm right on the border of Alabama. What's happened now is all IVF clinics in Alabama have ceased doing any kind of treatment because they don't know what this looks like moving forward, right? So that's the question is, they've asked that question, what are we supposed to do with these embryos, right? Because people have multiple embryos. It's also very common to implant multiple embryos. They'll implant 2 to 3 embryos. Some doctors will do more. That's an ethical discussion, but they usually do 2 to 3 embryos because the hope is one will take. And very often none will take. So if we implant 3 embryos and only one takes, am I now responsible for wrongful death? Because those 2 embryos died? And what are we going to do with the rest of your embryos? So now they're saying, well, you can't destroy these embryos. They're people. So their thought is embryo adoption. Why aren't we giving these up for embryo adoption? So now the people in Alabama that have embryos on ice, if you will, are saying, so I have three options essentially. You can pay eternally to have these things frozen. You can pay to keep them frozen for eternity, however long that is. 2, you can implant them in yourself, right? And have the, gestate the embryos. Or 3, you can give them up for embryo adoption. But the option to donate them to science or to just destroy the embryos is currently no longer on the table. You're muted for me.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. The option that surprised me, but I don't know why that surprised me. Of course, the same people who believe that, of course you can't use a human for science in their views. That makes sense. That's why. Okay. Right. So every IVF clinic in Alabama is they're just going to likely shut their doors. Or do we have an appeal on the way?
So we're kind of on hold right now. And just like all of the other crazy abortion shit that's been happening in this country. Our biggest fear, which we think is likely, is they're going to appeal this to the Supreme Court, because the goal was never to give rights back to the states. The goal was never to give abortion back to the states, right? And if you go to my page, I talk about abortion all the time. Back even before Roe overturned, when we had the leaked draft come out, those of us that worked in abortion care knew this was coming down. We knew that the judges were looking at, it was a Mississippi case. Dobbs is the name of the Mississippi case. So it was a Mississippi case that had gone up in front of the Supreme Court. They had tried this multiple times before. The Supreme Court at that time had multiple options. They could have overturned Planned Parenthood v. Casey, but not overturned Roe. They could have done a whole bunch of other things, but we knew they were going to overturn Roe. And when the leaked draft came out, I made a video saying this is happening. They are overturning Roe because we know that there's a bigger plan in place here. And people consistently are like, you're fear mongering. That's not true. That's not true. Now we've overturned Roe. Now we have abortion bans across the country. Now we've had women being arrested for the outcomes of their pregnancy, which they said would never happen. That's fear mongering. We now have states that are arguing that you can only perform an abortion to save someone's life. That is a very clear distinction. That means I can't act to prevent serious disability. I can't act to prevent serious bodily harm. I can only act when you are about to die, when your death is imminent if I don't act. Where that line is, I don't know. But when the abortion ban says you may only act to save a person's life, there are abortion bans that say you can act to prevent serious physical disability or bodily harm. Alabama says you can act to prevent the death of a person. That's very, very specific. So we have that going on across the nation right now.
How would you square that? If you can act only to prevent the death of a person, but now you've said an embryo is a person, now who's the person that you can act, right? Now you've got, that sounds like a total abortion ban to me.
So now you've got the issue of fetal personhood, because if a fetus is a person, a full person, that's what fetal personhood means. It means a fetus is a full person with all the rights as you and I, all of them. So when you have a fetus that is a full person and you have a pregnant person that is a full person, who's your patient? Who do you act to save? And who comes above the other person? So that's a big medically ethical issue when it comes to fetal personhood, because we can also, if a fetus is a full person, if I'm pregnant and I decline this medication or this treatment because I don't want it, the state can, this is where it gets hairy, right? We don't know what's going to happen, but legally the state could override that decision and say, you're getting this treatment, you're going to do this, you're going to take this medication. If you don't, we'll jail you and make you take it. And if you think they won't jail pregnant people to protect the fetus, they do it in Alabama all the time.
Oh, they love putting people in jail in Alabama. It's like their best industry. It's what they might be best at.
If you Google, if anyone wants to do some Googling and look up some stuff, Google women jailed, what's it called? Chemical endangerment of a child law is a law in Alabama. So what they're doing is they use other laws to criminalize pregnant people, because the abortion ban might say the exception is you cannot penalize the pregnant person. The pregnant person will not be charged under this act, right? A lot of them say that, but they can charge you under other shit. So in Alabama, they are arresting people for chemical endangerment of a child. The point of that law was, if I use drugs, I don't know what I can and can't say on TikTok Live, but if I use drugs and I leave paraphernalia sitting out and I have kids running around my house and someone calls the police and the police come over and they see that I leave my stuff out for my kids to get into, I'm now have chemically endangered a child, right? I have exposed them to these chemicals that they could easily grab and put in their mouth, put in their bodies. That is not how that law is being used. That law is being used to jail pregnant people for not following insert here. So we have people in jail because they tested positive for marijuana, but they used it before they even knew they were pregnant. But now because they used it at 6 weeks pregnant, you tested positive for marijuana, we're going to put you in jail to protect your fetus.
Which is wild, because I think even those studies are like, you have very conflicting studies on the use of THC during pregnancies. Like when my ex was having our child, like we looked at those studies, and at the very least it's conflicting.
Anything, alcohol. It could be alcohol. It can be any kind of chemical endangerment of a child, and they can jail you. There's one county specifically that's doing a whole lot of it. Trying to think of how to spell it so that way.
Some of the stuff that classifies as paraphernalia, kits used, intended for use, or designed for use in planting, propagating, cultivating, growing, or harvesting of any species of plant which is a controlled set. Like that's so now if you happen to have like a grow, that counts. Just having a grow, or the tools of having a grow. Or
yes,
insane.
If you look up on The Guardian, they have a really great article about it. It's a couple months old. It's called "An Alabama Woman Was Imprisoned for Endangering Her Fetus. She Gave Birth in a Jail Shower." So that's the story of Ashley Caldwell. She, if I remember her case correctly, she had tested positive for methamphetamine while pregnant. She was only, I think, 6 to 8 weeks pregnant at the time. They jailed her for testing positive for meth. I don't know if it was really I don't know the details of that. I don't know if she was really using meth. I don't know if it was a false positive. I don't know all of it. But the way that it happens in Alabama is they jail you, and a condition of your bond, you're jailed on a $10,000 bond, and a condition of that bond is you must go to drug and alcohol treatment. Well, how do you get into drug and alcohol treatment? You have a mental health professional come in and evaluate you. We use something called ASAM criteria, which is the American Society of Addiction Medicine. Based on your evaluation, you qualify for different levels of care: inpatient care, outpatient, like some kind of IOP care, all these different levels. And then there's like an education level of care where you take like an 8-hour drug and alcohol class. So varying levels of care. If you qualify for none of the levels of care because you don't have an addiction issue, you don't go to treatment. Like if you don't have cancer, you don't get oncology treatment, right? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
But then Ashley Caldwell ended up getting stuck. You get stuck in limbo because she didn't qualify for treatment. She had a full mental health evaluation. They said, you don't have an addiction issue. You don't qualify for treatment. But Alabama said, we're not going to let you out till you go to treatment. So now you're stuck in limbo, right? How do you get out? She paid her bond. Her lawyer was like, we can pay her bond. And the state of Alabama was like, you can't get out till you go to treatment. So then the jail in Alabama was pressuring her, just say you have a drug and alcohol problem. Just say you have a problem so you can go to treatment. And she was like, but I don't. She started bleeding during her pregnancy, developed a complication during her pregnancy, a hematoma, which leads to higher risk of miscarriage. And she ended up giving birth in a jail shower at like 7 months pregnant. Welcome to Alabama. You muted for me.
Sorry, thank you. But the jail's basically telling her to, like, say you have an addiction, which then in the future could definitely be used against you in some sort of paternity or maternity suit, like, or it could be used against you for jobs, for if you're renting. All those things could be used against you. So there's her options. Her options are like put something permanently on her record, and risk it, or stay in jail. But it's not a war on women, Danielle. We're just the men are just trying to do the right thing. This is not a war on women. We're just telling you what you need to do, and you guys aren't listening.
Right. Obviously. It's that like patronizing, like we know better, so let us help you, silly little women.
That's why we have to put these laws in place so that you guys, and we do step by step all the smart steps that we're taking.
And she's not the only one. Like there are stories upon stories upon stories like this. This is not an anomaly. There are many women jailed in Alabama under this clause. And the other thing is, it doesn't even have to be you. If your partner, let's say your male partner has a drug or alcohol issue, and they find, just like you said, any paraphernalia or anything like that, because you're not protecting that fetus from the environment that you're living in, and your partner has chemicals or things like that in the house, you will still be jailed.
Yeah, so that's what, like, this is wild what's listed here. So I assume these would be, like, say that you have a miscarriage, right? Then they can now go look into your life. So if they go search your house after you have a miscarriage, let's say they're suspicious, and they find a scale that could be used for weighing something, that counts as paraphernalia here. Scales and balances, dilutants, separation, gins and sifters, I don't know what that is, blenders, bowls, containers. We go further down: metal, wooden, acrylic, glass, stone, plastic, or ceramic pipes with or without screens, water pipes, carburation tubes and devices, smoking and carburation masks, roach clips. That's just something that you hold something with. All of these things. This is absolutely one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen in my life. How many people would be guilty if they were in this scenario? Like, please tell me she didn't get banned. Okay, good. She's back. By the way, while I'm bringing Danielle back up, we are going to allow questions. So if you have questions to ask Danielle, feel free to jump in the box, and I'll bring you up when we're done covering these things. But Danielle said she will take questions. So
yeah, I got booted for some reason really quick, but
that was weird.
It's been like an internet thing.
I'm just thinking, like, all of my friends that have children, they most of these things exist in their house. And if you
so that's what I was going to say. I have most of those things in my house. So for one thing, marijuana in Florida is medically legal. Lots of people have that kind of stuff in their house, right? It's not in Alabama. I will fully give you that. But lots of people have that kind of, like, they have water pipes, things like that in their house. I bake. I'm a really big baker. I have scales in my house. I have sifters in my house. I have all of these things because I bake. So it depends on the context of what's going on in the house and stuff, right? But like jailing women in Alabama, absolutely not a new thing. The other thing that you'd brought up is miscarriages. You're like, are they going to go to your house and like investigate, what happened to the pregnancy? So one of the big issues in Alabama, they're definitely not afraid to jail women. We had a case in Alabama. I can't remember. I think it was in 2019. The mother's name started with an M. Was it Marche Johnson? Give me a second, because if I just got that name right, I'm going to be really impressed with myself.
I'm impressed that you got a first and a last name together. That's impressive.
It was Marche Jones. I was so close, y'all.
I was really close. Yeah.
That's really close. So in the New York Times, there's an article on it. This is from 2019, so I did get the year right. Alabama woman who was shot while pregnant is charged with the fetus death. So she was pregnant. Got into an argument with somebody. That person then pew-pewed and hit the stomach, and the fetus died, and she was arrested for manslaughter.
Wait, what? Hold on.
Yeah.
So I'm reading it now. She gets in an altercation outside of a Dollar General, winds up being shot, and is charged with manslaughter. I'm seeing. Is that right?
Yes. And the police said that they charged her because she didn't remove herself from the dangerous situation. Alabama.
I honestly don't have anything to say. That's like that doesn't happen in any other scenario. There's no, like, I can't even, I'm trying to come up with a scenario where a law would be even remote. Like, you wouldn't, if you got in a car and you got in a car wreck, but you weren't driving, and the driver maybe was got out of control, you wouldn't be charged because you chose to get in the car with the driver. Or maybe in Alabama you would. Maybe that's what it's opening the door to. Like, you just can't do anything now?
So there was also, since we're going to talk about this, in 2015, there was a pregnant woman in New York who got in a car accident. I just got an age restriction notification, FYI.
You're muted. Happens to my co-host all the time too. They don't think you're over 18.
I just got it again. Maybe that's a
it might be age restricted for me. I may need to. Here's what I think I need to do. I think I need to restart the live and make it make it age restricted. I think that's probably what I have to do. So let's do that.
That works.
All right. I'll start. Just look for my live to pop up in a couple to set aside their partisanship. If you care at all about women, if you care at all about the women in your life, and again, this isn't just for people who are pro-choice. This is for everybody. Pro-life people have to end pregnancies. It happens all the time, and we've seen it in Texas. This is not a winning issue politically for Republicans. As disastrous as this is, if it allows us to then codify Roe and protect access and protect the rights to women over their own bodies, then maybe we find a silver lining. No message yet from Danielle. Let's see if Jen's talked to her. Shit, Jen might be gone. One of the mods, can you reach out to her? Oh, Jen is still here. I thought she was maybe gone. Can you send her a message or just share the live with her, Jen? I hope she didn't get banned. That would be horrific. Or did you? I guess I'll ask. Oh, Jen needs. Hey.
Hey, so I don't know if this could be an issue, but you know how I screen record the lives? I've got one of the accounts I used to screen record. I had an age issue with it because it was saying I wasn't 18 or something like that. I can't find the live with that other burner account that I use.
Okay.
Her age isn't listed on her TikTok.
She's here.
Okay, cool.
All right. Thanks, Jen.
Yep.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Yeah. Did you have to do an age verification thing?
No, it didn't make me do anything.
Oh, good. Well, welcome back. I let them know when you were gone. I figured maybe the best course of action, because I don't know I definitely don't have the best questions to ask. Maybe if you just want to finish up the explanation of what you're doing and what's happening, and then I'll just open it up to a Q&A, if that works for you.
So now what we're doing is I'm going to bring up this one other case because I think it's important, and then I'll let you know how we're moving forward with it. But the other case, because we talked about the Marsha Jones case, the other case that I think is really important that shows how far this can go, there was a 2015 case out of New York, of all places, where a pregnant woman was driving. She got in a car accident and the fetus died. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and she was arrested and charged because she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. So if we want to talk about like how far this fetal personhood stuff goes, this is how far it goes. Like, you could be arrested for not wearing a seatbelt. You could be arrested for not taking prenatal vitamins. You could be arrested for having something in your house that they have decided is unsafe to a child. Like, I have a lot of tools in my house. I do a lot of work. I love having tools, all that stuff. So like, is that a danger? So this is how far this stuff goes. Like, wearing a seatbelt.
What about mothers who are on psych meds? Would they have to? Let's see. Somebody wanted me to ask. Patients who take psych meds would have to stop pregnant people. I'm not sure.
So all psych meds are different. Some you can be on. Some you can be on when you're pregnant. Some you can't. You can look up. There is a grading system that tells you what medications There's pregnancy categories. The FDA has pregnancy categories. So you can look up what pregnancy category your medication is to determine. So there's A, B, C, D, and X. X is like, you ain't taking this shit during pregnancy. Absolutely not. This is definitely, without a doubt, gonna cause some abnormalities. So you can look it up to see which, like, where the FDA categorizes your medication. And some medication is safe during pregnancy, some isn't. More than likely, what we usually do is there's like a cost benefit analysis that happens. Is it going to cost you more? Is it going to be worse for you to be off this medication than it would be if you continued taking it during pregnancy, right? Like, where's the biggest risk? And there's often medication that you can be switched to if you're pregnant. So like if you're taking an antidepressant or like something for bipolar disorder, for example, some of those medications you can't take during pregnancy. If you're on something like that, your doctor can try to put you on something else instead. Is it going to come down to we are going to force people to be off medication? I mean, you can't get an abortion because of mental health issues, right? Like in most states, you can't go in and claim like, I can't stop taking my psych meds and being pregnant causes me to stop taking my psych meds. This is really bad for me. I can't do this. That does not qualify you right now. So if we look at the fact that they're not allowing that to be an exception, I don't think that's going to be an exception if they try to establish fetal personhood nationwide, which is where they're going.
Okay. A few people asked where would they access those resources to know what medications and like how they're categorized?
So you can Google your medication. Like I'll just type in, so right now I'll type in Zoloft pregnancy category into Google and it'll pull it right up. So like Prozac is level C, Luvox level C, Paxil level D, Zoloft level C. So it'll pull all that up for you.
Okay. And I guess the question was, could they force someone to stop taking their meds even if they didn't want to?
That's a really great question. I think it's possible. And that's the difficult thing is like, we don't know how far they want to take this and stretch this. We do know that they want to take it to the federal level. And what they're going to use to try to do that is the 14th Amendment. So they usually try to claim that the 14th Amendment, that what they call persons or personhood in the 14th Amendment applies to fetuses. They're trying to say that applies to all people. Fetuses are people, even unborn children, as they like to call them, even extrauterine children. So they're going to try to use the 14th Amendment to say life begins at conception. Their argument is that the people that drafted the 14th Amendment believed that life begins at conception. That's crap. The 14th Amendment was put forth in 1886. We barely had discovered fertilization and fertility at that point, like just barely. And I can guarantee you, it was discovered in Asia, by the way, in like 1920, we discovered when ovulation occurred. So that was actual ovulation. It was before that. It was like 1860 something or something like that, where we had actually discovered like human ovum and sperm. They discovered sperm before that, but they called it a parasite.
Yeah, sometimes it feels that way.
I think it was 1830, they discovered sperm and called it a parasite or something like that. And then by like 1870, they were like, it's not a parasite. It actually does stuff. You think between 1870 and 1886, they got that information disseminated across the world for the people that were making the 14th Amendment? No.
Yeah, probably not.
Those men still didn't know how pregnancy worked.
I think it's insane to use the 14th Amendment while you're literally stripping the rights of certain people and giving those rights to somebody else. Like it makes no sense. You're breaking the 14th Amendment by using the 14th Amendment in this case.
Someone had said there was a question there like, what about cigarettes? So that's a big piece that we're talking about is, this is debatable. Some people do have like a glass of wine here or there with pregnancy. A lot of people's doctors have like, if you ask people that have been pregnant, they'd be like, oh yeah, my doctor told me like one every once in a great while was fine. Like not a big deal. The issue is we don't really know what level affects pregnancy. So we tell people to stay away from it altogether. We know that it does affect pregnancy at some level. I'm trying to be really careful not to use certain words. But we know that drinking affects pregnancy at a certain level. We just don't know at what level. So we tell people don't do it. if they catch you having that glass of wine, or if they catch you smoking a cigarette, if you're sitting outside with a bunch of your friends and you are like, hey, let me get a drag off that cigarette. I haven't had one in like 5 months because I'm pregnant. And you take one drag and someone happens to snap a social media photo at that moment and they post it to Instagram and someone doesn't like you and they see that and they report you. You now have photo evidence of you endangering this pregnancy.
So I guess, yeah, that's the other question. So outside of an instance where the pregnancy is terminated, are there lesser charges if the pregnancy isn't terminated? Like for that reason, if somebody has that picture, is that in itself now a crime?
So in Alabama, they can jail you for chemical endangerment of a child. Yes.
Jesus.
Alabama doing the most.
Y'all want to live in Alabama? Let's go to Alabama. That's so
just to give you an idea of how wild Alabama gets, I did an education session with some city officials and a couple state representatives, and I was talking about maternal mortality. And I don't know if anyone knows our rates, but they're really, really bad. I have some videos about that, but our maternal mortality rate is 32.9. The next closest nation is France, and I think theirs is like 8.7. So ours is 3 times higher than the next closest nation. But if you're a Black person, it's actually 69.9. So it's more than double the nationwide average.
Wait.
So
the maternal mortality rate is 69%?
No. So that's a really good
69
question.
sorry, not 69%. It's 69 per 100,000, right?
Right. 69.9 per 100,000.
Yeah.
So the nationwide maternal mortality is 32.9. But if we break it down by race, I think for white people, it's like 26.6, something like that. And then for Black people, it's 69.9. So it's twice the national average.
Jesus.
I'll let you guess how Alabama does with it.
Yeah, not better. I'm going to say not better. Probably worse on both.
They're one of the worst, for sure. Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi also get pretty high up there, but they're one of the worst.
It's amazing to see these red states, like they're actually losing more people based on their laws. Their laws are not protecting people. They're endangering children. They're endangering mothers. And the statistics back it up. And their response to that is, oh, well, let's do more of it. We need to do more of this.
Yeah, basically. And they tried to, so as we're presenting about maternal mortality rates, right? Maternal mortality rates are measured as 1 per 100,000. So if one person has a fatality for every 100,000, our rate is 1, right? So that's how we measure it. It's measured based off of obstetric causes, and mortality is measured based off of an unalive of during pregnancy or 42 days following. So the postpartum period also counts for 42 days. So that's a big issue, like postpartum hemorrhage, that kind of stuff, that all counts towards it. The 3 leading causes are hemorrhage, sepsis, and usually like a blood pressure issue, like preeclampsia, stroke, something like that. So I give this lecture, explain all of this, and someone's like, oh, I have a question. We're in Alabama, right? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I feel like you're inflating these rates. This is not true. The only reason, this is the worst argument you've ever heard. The only reason our maternal mortality rate, it's not a question. The only reason our maternal mortality rates are so high in the US is because of pew-pew violence. And I was like, that's not the argument you think you're making. Like, you're not making, that's not a flex.
That's not better. Yeah.
This isn't a flex. And also, you're fucking wrong because you didn't listen to anything I just said when I explained to you how we measure it and what's included in it. And also, he's not wrong because the leading cause of unaliving in pregnancy in the United States is actually not obstetric causes. Overriding all 3 obstetric causes, overriding anything counted on our maternal mortality rate. These are not counted in maternal mortality rates. The leading cause of unalive in pregnancy is male partners who unalive their pregnant female partner.
So that number is over. Yeah, that number's over 32.9. Then just the partner terminating the presidency is over 32.9. So United States we're first in congratulations to America. We're first in maternal mortality rate, and also I imagine we're first in the other. I don't know, how do you categorize that in the partner crime?
I don't know if I can say it.
Just it's all right, whatever.
It's called a femicide, is what we call it.
Femicide. Okay, gotcha. And I'd imagine we're number one in the world with that as well.
So Brazil actually gets us. Oh. Brazil gets us.
Again, not a
Something I think is really interesting, though, and I say this all the time, is we keep hearing about this male loneliness epidemic and all that stuff. I worked in, I think it was 2021, because it was right after the pandemic. Puerto Rico, and you can look this up, Puerto Rico declared a state of emergency. It was post-Maria, post-Hurricane Maria, post-pandemic, and they had a femicide issue on the island. So they declared a state of emergency because they were like, what is going on, right? So what they do is they hire research teams to come in and kind of try to figure out what's going on. Why are these rates going up so high? What's happening? Well, they declared a state of emergency because one woman was being unalived every 3 days on the island on average. In the United States, it's one every 3 minutes. So where's our state of emergency? We don't have one because we don't care. State of emergencies are actually a big deal because they influx money into the issue, right? When Puerto Rico declared a state of emergency, it allowed money to be influxed into the issue. They could hire researchers to come down and say, why is this happening? Where should you be spending your money to get the most outcome for your buck? And we just ignore it in the US. Like it's not an issue.
The one in every 3 minutes, what stat specifically is that polling?
Let me find it. And I could be wrong, y'all. I could be misquoting it.
Is that like an act of violence? I'd imagine, because unaliving, I would imagine that would be too high. But an act of violence that makes 350 million people. I don't think that'd be that outrageous.
Fair. Let me find some good recent data. Scan.
That is, first of all, good for Puerto Rico. If there was ever a reason for a state of emergency.
Right? Let me make sure I can find the study that this is pulling from. United States appears around them. I'm trying to find where they're pulling this. So I found a stat and there we go. So this study was in the Journal of American Medical Women's Association. It's not the stat that I just gave you. This is an old stat, firearm availability and female homicide victimization rates among 25 populous high-income countries. What this study found was that of all the femicides that occur in high-income countries, 70% occur within the United States. We currently rank 34th for intentional female unaliving. It's 2.6 is our rate, 2.6 per 100,000 women.
Are unalived?
I'm sorry, it's the stat that, say that again?
No, keep going, you're good.
That's the rate. So remember, rate is per 100,000. Yeah, so it's 2.6.
Yeah, was it the rate of being unalived, or is that
correct?
Assault. Okay, so Jesus, that's so much.
If anyone's curious, our abortion fatality rate in the United States is 0.4. 0.4. So lower than our maternal mortality, lower than this. I'm currently on a website called Sanctuary for Families. I'm going to have to really dig to find this, but it says almost 3 women are killed a day by an intimate partner in the United States. So it's 3 a day, not every 3 minutes. My bad. I might have mixed that up with another one. That's coming from the Violence Policy Center. Their 2018 analysis of unaliving data. It's called When Men Unalive Women. And we have, so remember in Puerto Rico, maybe that's where my brain got mixed up. It was 1 every 3 days. In the United States, it's 3 a day. And we still just ignore it. Like it's not an issue.
Ooh. All right. I have a daughter. This is cool. This is really good information.
Isn't it?
Okay. Will you let me know when you're ready for questions, by the way. You just let me know when you're ready to do those.
Sure, let's do them.
Okay, we'll go one at a time. This is, I think, Graciela. Hey, are you there?
Hi, thanks for having me up.
Yeah.
Danielle, I wanted to ask you, I couldn't find it anywhere, but the attorney that filed the lawsuit in Alabama for those 3 couples, do you know if his backing was from the Alliance Defending Freedom group?
I absolutely would not be surprised. I don't know off the top of my head, but I absolutely would not be surprised. Alliance Defending Freedom is one of the groups that's, there's 2 to 3, the argument, usually I would say 2, sometimes 3 main groups in the United States that are like backing all of these abortion bans. They're the ones, that's why all these abortion bans sound so alike, because they're just copy pasted from these groups. And Alliance Defending Freedom is one of the groups that puts out this like model legislation. They're the ones that took the Dobbs case to the Supreme Court. Absolutely would not be surprised.
Yeah, me either. I just wish I could find it. And did you happen to read his brief on this and see that when he wrote it up, he didn't use like case studies to reflect that a fetus is a child, that he actually used a dictionary definition that goes back like, I don't know, 150 years. Did you happen to notice that? I just thought that was really interesting.
And now I'll get everyone all discombobulated because I've read multiple like drafts and opinions coming from this court case, and I'll forget who said what specifically. But Jay, you were talking earlier, and something I think is really interesting about the Republican Party that we've noticed, and again, you can Google this, you can find this, there have been studies on this. There's this big like anti-intellectual movement. So you were saying earlier, like, you can't even argue with them because they don't even argue with facts and they refuse to believe fact. There's this huge push of anti-intellectualism happening in the Republican Party. And some studies say it went back as far as like Reagan, Bush, but a lot of people have been saying it's been kicking up a lot more recently. And that's kind of the issue, is stuff like that is, they'll go back and they'll like pull from a dictionary definition from like 1970. And they'll be like, well, see, it says this. Or they'll pull from like the Bible and say the Bible says this, or they'll pull from these. Bible's a great one. So yeah, they pull from fucking anything. And it's one of those things where you want to look at that and be like, a lawyer wrote this, like an educated, supposedly educated lawyer. These people are not stupid. They know exactly what they're doing. They're just hoping you're stupid.
That's why I asked if the Alliance Defending Freedom group was behind it, because that brief was remarkable. And then I just had one other quick question. I already know that Alabama is having a lot of problems obtaining birth control, like a very large problem, because they didn't they won't allow for the Title X funding. So the women that are living off of the state just don't have any money, or are not able to actually obtain abortion. But my question is, what does fetal personhood, what effect will that have on birth control, if any, in particular IUDs?
So it's a really great question, especially in Alabama. And I'll tell you why. Because emergency contraception does not halt implantation, right? It halts ovulation. So it's not an abortifacient. It doesn't do anything if an egg has already been fertilized. You are just kind of SOL at that point. Emergency contraception is meant to prevent or delay ovulation, so that way a sperm cannot fertilize an egg, right? Do you think fucking Alabama knows that? They don't. And the reason we know they don't know that, sorry y'all, I have military jets flying over. The reason we know they don't know that is because they will specifically say, well, we're not trying to go after contraception. We're just trying to go after over-the-counter stuff that's not being monitored by use by your doctor. That's emergency contraception. You're going after emergency contraception, which they're claiming prevents implantation. So their hope is to outlaw anything that would prevent implantation, because if an embryo is a full person, something I think a lot of people don't understand is you are not pregnant until implantation, which happens about 8 to 10 days after conception. Sperm meets egg, then it travels down to the uterus, it implants, and at that moment you are pregnant. what we're now doing is legislating bodies before someone's even pregnant at this point. So if you do that, if you say we're going to make it illegal to have or take anything that prevents implantation, if you take something that prevents implantation, you have now committed the crime of unaliving, right? Because that was a fertilized embryo that supposedly was a full person with all the same rights. So the copper IUD can prevent implantation. Some progesterone heavy IUDs, it's arguable if they can or can't. They definitely make your cervical mucus a lot thicker. So then the question is, what does that mean? What does preventing implantation mean? Because I'm not taking anything to get rid of implantation. But if I take something that makes my cervical mucus thicker or changes the pH balance in there, I have to be really careful about what I say, then am I preventing implantation, right? So IUDs heavily would be on the chopping block, not all of them, but definitely some of them. And they're definitely coming after emergency contraception, which is over the counter. Even though it doesn't prevent implantation, they're claiming it does. And we all know at this point, like, they don't care about facts.
I just wanted to ask you one more thing. Are you aware that Texas changed the law a while back that if you're under the age of 18, you can no longer get birth control without your parents' consent?
I was aware. And that's probably going to happen a lot more.
It is.
It's probably going to happen a lot more now. Yeah. Unfortunately, and you brought up a good point that I'll mention as well. Alabama and Texas are great examples. We have something called maternity care deserts and contraception deserts in the United States. If you've never heard of them, do a Google dive. Like, it'll only take you 5 minutes to learn about each one. Contraception deserts mean that you don't have a clinic in your vicinity that provides the full range of contraceptive options. Being in a maternity care desert means you either in your vicinity do not have a provider that provides obstetric care or a hospital that provides maternity care. Over 50% of counties, of rural counties, over 50% of the rural counties in the United States are deserts, which means over half the people that live in rural America, which encompasses, I think, like 78% of America is rural land. So if you live in a rural area, over half of those people do not actually have access to contraception, and they do not have access to maternity care.
It's crazy. Idaho's a big desert for that too. But I want to thank you so much for letting me ask some questions.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
Have a really great day.
Thanks.
You too.
Perfect. And then I think it was Ginger. Hey, Ginger.
Hey.
Good morning. It's not morning anymore, is it?
No. I just had a couple of questions. I'm located in Texas, but was just wondering, we just had this case recently where the corrections officer wasn't relieved from her position, and then, her baby unfortunately died, and she tried to sue, and Texas said that it wasn't a person, so she wasn't able to really get anything from that. But at what point, since they are going to be considered people, would we be able to, I guess, request child support from the pregnancy test, or even try to get on WIC or, TANF or anything like that? Like, I guess, when would that be an option if the fetus is now going to be considered a person?
So it's a great question. And that's one of those moments where we're like, this is going to have to play out in court, and we're curious how far this is going to go. So you'll notice the Alabama lower courts said you don't win this wrongful unaliving claim. This isn't a person. But when they appealed it to the Alabama Supreme Court, they said you do win the wrongful unaliving claim because this was a person, which is the exact opposite of what Texas said in that case, right? That would have been a wrongful unaliving case. So Texas said the exact opposite. Now that we have Alabama setting the precedent, this is now like a legal precedent set in Alabama to say, yeah, you win that case. I think it's going to be really interesting to see all the additional fallouts. Like, when do you get to claim this embryo on your taxes? When do I get to start collecting child support? When does child custody stuff come into play? Like, do you get to come spend time with my pregnant belly? Like,
when are they going to be issued a social security number? All of the things.
Right.
Well, what about what if we set those lines? Then you also are going to open up the option of people like fraudulently saying that they're pregnant, right? Or they like trying to scam the system too. Like this is a logistical nightmare. Like this is never going to make sense. This is this will lead to endless litigation for as long as these laws are in place.
Oh, 100%.
I highly recommend people get life insurance. Like if you get pregnant, a third of pregnancies end in miscarriage. Get that life insurance on that embryo, because if it doesn't come to fruition, right? Like you should be able to collect life insurance on that.
Yeah, well, I guess that was all I had to say. Planning my escape for the next 2 years, so I won't be in Texas too much longer. But thank you so much for all of the information.
Of course.
Thanks, Ginger.
Have a good one.
And just we're going to bring up Diva now. Just a reminder, anybody that has questions, come up. We're not looking, this isn't an opposition only live. This is anybody with questions, please come up. Hey, Diva.
Hey, how are ya?
I'm a little shook today. Thanks for asking.
I am shooketh too. I've been listening while I've been working, and I literally had to stop working. I'm just staring at my phone in utter disbelief. Danielle, if you could you say hi or something in the comment section so we can get your for what your name is here on TikTok, because I can't click on you to follow you. I'm sure others might like that too. There we go.
Sure. I'm in bed with Danielle, but I just put something in the chat.
Okay, great. I'm in the great state of Florida. Woohoo! Yeah, it's like living in purgatory. But anyway, I just found out yesterday that SB 476, which is a state bill 476, is now moving through the Florida legislature, and it is the fetal personhood. So all this stuff that's happening in Alabama is now going to be moving down here to Florida.
Yes.
And I have 2 daughters, and and a daughter-in-law, and this is horrifying. My son and his wife are actually trying for their second baby, and I don't even want her to get pregnant at this point. It's terrifying.
So, I have done IVF in Florida. I am a person that did IVF in Florida. I don't have any embryos on ice. They're all gone, y'all. But it is something that is really heavily problematic. Feels like not enough to say here. But if you think so we've got Alabama, right? Like, I'm not trying to be rude, but people kind of ignore Alabama a lot. You got Mobile, you got Montgomery, and then people are like, what else is in Alabama? In Florida, we have Orlando, we have Miami, we have the Tampa St. Pete area, we have the Florida Keys, which, not gonna lie, is taken over by a lot of the gays, and that's okay. But we've got a lot of fucking people in Florida. We've got a lot more people in Florida than they do in Alabama. This is gonna be a wreck in Florida. Not that it's not a wreck in Alabama, but IVF's a big industry down here, y'all. We got a lot of people. There are multiple, like in Alabama, there might be a handful of fertility clinics. I'm not sure how many there are, but they're mostly in the big populous areas. This case came out of Mobile, which is their capital. So there's not huge population hubs in Alabama like there are several of them here in Florida. Miami has multiple fertility clinics. It's going to shut down the entire fertility industry here in Florida. And then it's going to bring up a whole lot of other stuff, right? Like child custody.
We need to be calling our senators and our legislators here in Florida and encouraging them not to move it. But we already know that the Republicans have a supermajority here in Florida. And so there's really not much. I mean, I don't want to sound defeatist, but we pretty much are defeated from the get-go down here.
I wouldn't I don't want to be a defeatist either. And for everyone getting upset that she said the gays, I'm a gay. So I say that often. Like, we talk about our community down here. We're like, well, the gays. So it's a very Southern colloquial thing. Sorry if it's not something that you say out there, but don't worry. I'm the gays. So I'm okay.
Well, and that's another thing I have. I mean, one of my daughters is gay. And so I have to think about not just, I mean, like if Trump, however, somehow gets back in office, which I hopefully can't see that happening, I will have to leave the entire country, not just the state of Florida, because of this Project 2025 stuff coming in. It is specifically targeting LGBTQ and stuff like that. So I'm going to have to get out of the whole damn country, but I know we're not talking about that. But is there anything else we can do?
So in Florida, we are doing a pretty okay-ish job. So we're currently fighting that 6-week ban. We have a 15-week ban here in Florida. That came down, I can't remember, the years all go together, but a little over a year ago or something like that now. And then they put in a 6-week ban. That 6-week ban is still pending in the court system. If that 6-week ban comes through, I think that tells us a lot about where we're going, because it tells us that it was put forth, the 6-week ban was put forth pretty recently. It was put forth by the current legislators. So that tells us that they were successful at that. If they're successful at that, they're going to think that they're going to be successful at this bill. And I don't think they're wrong. And I don't remember who put forth this bill in Florida. I can't remember off the top of my head who it was. But it establishes the wrongful unaliving ability. So it doesn't do the same thing that Alabama did, right? This was a court order that came down from Alabama, but it establishes fetal personhood through the ability for you to sue somebody for the wrongful unaliving of a fetus. So there's all these different backdoor ways to establish fetal personhood. You don't have to make a law that says fetal personhood is a thing, right? Although they are going to try to add that to the Constitution. They did back when Roe passed in 1973. Immediately after Roe passed, Republicans tried to pass an amendment to the Constitution that specifically said fetuses are people. So this is coming. Like, they've already tried it and they failed. And now they're looking at the current administration and saying, we think we can do this. And what I need people to understand about, like, Trump has said, I'm going to do a 16-week ban, right? I think that's his most recent thing. Kate Cox would have had to leave the country, y'all. Like, if you followed the Kate Cox case, she would have had to leave the country. And then you come into question of, will pregnant people be allowed to even leave the country?
Probably
not. Will you be allowed to use your passport? Probably not.
Well, in Idaho, they put laws in that said even if you leave the state to go out of state to get an abortion, then you can be prosecuted for an out of state abortion as well. So we know that plenty of red states at the very least would try that, and if that's a national law, of course conservatives would make that a law that you can't leave the country.
I mean,
in Oklahoma, go ahead. Sorry, Diva.
I was just going to say, even in one interview that Trump did, he said women should be punished for having an abortion.
True. And the Oklahoma has a law, an abortion ban law. It's already banned in the state. They just keep piling stuff on top. But the Oklahoma bill that just came out is also very concerning for a multitude of reasons. One of them is it establishes a database that the government has an access to. So the Department of Health would be required to create and establish and maintain a database for anyone that received a medically necessary abortion, because all abortions will be outlawed no matter what. They already are in the state of Oklahoma. So the bill redefines abortions that are medically necessary as a pre-viability separation from the mother. So they're completely redefining it. And this is where we get into, like, Republicans are not on board with facts, because those are abortions. And then Republicans will say there's no abortion necessary to save someone's life. That's not an abortion. Now this bill officially says that's not an abortion. It says it's a pre-viability separation from the mother. You are still required to try to keep the fetus alive and do absolutely everything you can to keep it alive. It establishes a database, so that way if you have to have that, the doctor has to, within 15 days, file a report with a patient identifier number on it, so that way they can identify you and find you. It specifically says the identifier must link to the woman, so that way the state can identify who the woman is. And you will have to justify as the provider why you provided that abortion, what was done, and why you did it. And then the state gets to investigate it. And another thing it's doing is Oklahoma is trying to keep people from leaving the state. And their attorney general, I love this quote, and I saved it for a reason because I think it's just so ridiculous. Marshall, their attorney general, said that if you help someone leave the state to obtain an abortion, that is criminal conspiracy. Even if, Diva, I just tell you, you know what, Diva, I know you can't get it here in Florida, but there's a clinic in Colorado. There's a clinic in DC that I know of that can get you in. I have now committed criminal conspiracy, even if all I do is verbally tell you about a clinic out of state. So he's saying one cannot seriously doubt that the state can prevent a mobster from asking a hitman to unalive a rival because the agreement occurred through spoken word. So too, here for the conspiracies to obtain an elective abortion.
And that's why I said earlier in the comments that this is a war on women. This has nothing to do with children or babies or anything else. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. It has to do with keeping us locked in, keeping us controlled. I mean, I know they're coming for no-fault divorce next so that women can't leave. And they want to take our contraceptive. Like, literally, they just want us to be captive, like in the 1950s.
There's a Texas legislator that also wants, and multiple legislators across this country that also want to ban marital grape, like that can't be a crime as well. So not only do you have that, you have the marital grape, you have no-fault divorce they want to get rid of, and then contraceptive. Like, all right.
Well, I can assure you that if things keep going the way they're going, I will remain man-free for the rest of my life. That's what I'm not going to be anyone's anything, and I'm not going to be held captive either. So
the gays will take you, y'all. The gays will take you. We'll take you in as long as you're friendly. You know, you support it. We'll take you in.
I told my daughter that too. I would talk to my gay daughter. I said, man, I wish that I was attracted to women, because no offense, Jay, but men just suck. I'm sorry. I don't want anything to do with them anymore.
I'm not attracted to men either. I hear you. I don't. We're gross. I don't get it. Yeah.
But, well, thank you for chatting with me. This has been one of the most eye-opening yet terrifying lives I've ever been a part of or listened to. But the education is awesome, and what we need to do is we need to ban all the women. I don't think enough women know this. I truly don't. Widespread don't know this. People that are living in California probably don't know what's happening in Alabama and Oklahoma, or if you're living in Minnesota, if you're, depending on where you live, you just maybe not know all this. And I don't think that they understand how draconian this is getting, and that we're going to need to band together and really, really fight.
I agree. It's going to be, especially in Florida, because we have an uphill battle over here. So yeah, Texas too.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I'm planning on staying here. I'm not going anywhere. Like I said, the only way I'd have to leave is if Trump won. But if Biden wins his next term, I'm going to stay here and fight. I'm not going to leave the state of Florida, but I'll stay and fight too, unless I have to leave for my daughter's safety. But other than that, I'll be here to fight with you.
I'll stay as long as I can for safety purposes too. That's until it gets super unsafe, then I'm out.
It's gonna suck. It's gonna suck so bad when you all leave and it's just us. I don't know. That's gonna suck.
Can you believe that we're actually? I mean, just think about it. Stop for one moment, real quick, before I jump down. Just stop and think one moment that we are having this conversation in the United States of America in the year 2024. This is utter insanity.
Yep. No disagreement.
All right. Talk to you later. I'll be modding down the comments.
Thanks, Diva.
Someone mentioned, and I think this is important to kind of say, I saw a comment go by super quick, and I can't catch all the questions or anything in the chat, y'all. So please come up. But I did catch something, probably a troll, but someone was like, oh, man bashing. Men, y'all need to understand the difference between people criticizing the patriarchal structure and criticizing individual men, right? When we say this stuff about oh, men suck, we're criticizing this patriarchal structure that was created and is maintained by men, and yes, by women that buy into it. Mostly white women in the South, I'm just saying. But in any case, something that I think would be really useful for people to look up and learn about is coverture laws. Because Jay, you mentioned marital that. So the reason that didn't become illegal till 1993. Across the United States, it was like various states had different laws, but across the US, it didn't become illegal to essay your wife until 1993. That wasn't that long ago. And coverture laws are the reason that we have a lot of the grape culture that we have today. So coverture laws are Old English laws that got brought over to the United States when the United States got founded. And if you know, oh my gosh, Abigail, it's a president's wife, guys. Last name is like, I want to, it's like
Trump.
Hamilton's. No, it's old.
It wasn't Trump. Oh.
I keep wanting to say Hamilton, but that's like, it's my gay self watching Hamilton all the time. Abigail Adams.
I think it's Adams.
Thank you. It's Adams. So she has a Remember the Ladies letter. It's a really famous letter. And people think she's asking for the female vote. They think that she's saying like, let women vote. She's not. She's saying end coverture. Because all men would be tyrants if they could, is what her letter says. And coverture was...
Okay. Can you explain what coverture is? I'm not sure. Okay.
Coverture was a law, Old English law that got brought over. And it says a husband covers his wife. So a wife is property. She's treated as property. A husband can do whatever he wants with his wife. That includes hurting her, right? So coverture was all the stuff that we think about in the past, like women couldn't get a bank account. You couldn't own a house. You couldn't own property. You couldn't travel without your husband's permission. You couldn't go to school without your husband's permission. You were covered by your husband. It's why we take husbands' last names, right? You are covered by your husband. So you cease to exist as an entity yourself. That's one of the biggest things about coverture. You do not exist as a legal person. You exist as property of your husband. That's why you can't vote. That's why you can't own property, right? You're not a person. That's what they're trying to get back to. We're trying to get back to coverture laws here. So that's why no fault divorce they're trying to get rid of that. That's why they're trying to have all these abortion bans. So if you look up coverture, you can see the history. And coverture didn't end in the United States. That's another big thing to realize. We chipped away at it, little pieces at a time, right? And grape itself used to be a property crime in the United States. You damaged somebody's property. So then you either had to marry her. If she was an unmarried woman, you had to marry her because you damaged somebody's property, or you had to pay the father money. If you did it to somebody's wife, you had to pay the husband money because it was a property crime. That's why we still have the grape culture and everything that we do here now. Why we say like, well, why wasn't her boyfriend with her? Why was she out alone? All that stuff stems back to coverture.
And now that you've explained that, let's just reinforce that those ended in, what you said, 1993?
So coverture got chipped away at. Coverture didn't end at all. All we did was get little, and that's why we still have this society. Part of the reason we still have this society today, right? Because we gave women bank accounts in 1978. We made marital grape illegal in 1993 across the nation. And no fault divorce got slowly adopted across the nation. I think totality, like the last people that adopted it was maybe in the 90s. I can't recall though.
Chris, welcome.
Thanks for being here, Danielle and Jay. Thanks for having this space. This is it feels like a lot going on right now, and I think it's so important to talk about this. But two quick things. I've been seeing a lot of things in the chat around like in other states, you're safe here, and I think it's always important to call out the fact that we're not safe anywhere right now, and that just because it's not happening in our state yet doesn't mean that it's not going to, that the plan is to get rid of rights for all of us, right? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. And
then the other part of this is that I would also expand that to say, it's not just about women. It's really about anybody who isn't a cishet man, because I mean, we're within the trans community, we're dealing with a lot of overlapping intersectional issues, and it's more important than ever to look at these issues intersectionally, not just because of repro justice, but also because of bodily autonomy in all of the ways.
I 100% agree. I'm going to pull up because I have some really good data on this that I think is really interesting. You'll have to give me a second to find it. Here it is. So when we're talking about abortion restrictions and bans, right? So looking at 1 year post Dobbs, and I can absolutely find you the study for this. I do have it cited because this is coming from one of my lectures. So the Dobbs decision currently, abortion restrictions affects about 48.4% of all AFAB people between the age of 15 to 49. So 48.4% are currently affected by severe abortion restrictions. They live in a state that is either completely banned or is likely to completely ban abortion in the near future. Of those people, 15.8 million of them are already parents. 2.9 million are disabled. 12.5 million are economically insecure. The abortion ban or restricted states encompasses 50.8% of white AFAB people, 43.1% of AFAB Latin people. They are the highest numbers at 6 million people. So we're looking at percentages. So by percentages, they're not the highest, but they are the highest by number because it affects 6 million people. 58.8% of black people, or black people that have the capacity for pregnancy is what we're talking about here. 26.1% of Asian people, 27% Pacific Islander, 60.8% of the indigenous population that is capable of pregnancy is currently affected by abortion bans. And then we have...
You said 59%? Is that what you said, 59?
60.8% of the indigenous population is currently affected by abortion bans. And I know I have data on non-binary and trans people as well. I just can't find it right now, but we do have data on that.
And I assume you saw the study that came out at the end of January about the estimated pregnancies from in states where there have been in the roughly 65,000.
I have. Someone's asking, AFAB means assigned female at birth. That's what AFAB means. So I apologize if anyone didn't know that. That's what AFAB is, assigned female at birth. AMAB is assigned male at birth. So to be like the most inclusive, sometimes, and this is what I always say during my lectures, if a study used the word women, I use the word women to stay in line with what the study says and because I use the study's language, right? Otherwise, we can definitely use the most inclusive language possible and we should always be trying to, right? So I have a video on those numbers, the 65,000 number. That's definitely an estimate, right? But what we do know is a large chunk of that came out of Texas, a really large chunk of that 65,000. It's, in case anyone didn't see it, it's 65,000 estimated pregnancies as a result of GRAPE since the overturn of Roe, which is a lot. It's a fucking lot, y'all. I did find those numbers, by the way. So of those 36 million people, AFAB people that we were talking about, 15.4 million are AFAB people of color, 2.9 million are disabled. I did the economically insecure, 1.3 million are transgender, and 1.2 million are LGBTQ plus people. So that's a lot of people, y'all, that are affected.
Yeah. Those numbers are going to blow my mind. Chris, anything else?
That's the gist of it. It's crushing because it feels like on every side we're so focused on restricting the rights of individuals to autonomy, and people look at it and say, well, it's not me. And I struggle with how we change the conversation. Like, no joke, my ex-girlfriend who had been like, yeah, Roe isn't my issue. And I was like, it is your issue. The day that Roe was overturned, she texted me and she's like, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I didn't ever stand up. I was wrong. How do we get people to understand that even if it doesn't infect you directly, even if you've had your tubes tied or had, even if you don't have kids, how do you see from your perspective that we can get people to understand this is everyone's issue?
So 2 thoughts come to mind here. One of them is research tells us that one of the best ways to have discussions about this issue is to tell stories. Tell other people's abortion stories, tell your own abortion stories. So that's one of the top ways to get people to engage in the conversation and sway them to the other side. The more people talk about this kind of stuff, the more people, because people sit around and they're like, well, I don't know anyone that's had an abortion. I have this lovely blanket. I love this thing. I got it in DC when I was up there for a march. It's a beautiful woven blanket. It says, everybody loves somebody who's had an abortion. This is inherently true. 1/4 of US AFAB people, 1/4, 1 in 4, will have an abortion before the end of their reproductive age. There are a multitude of reasons to have an abortion. None of them are my damn business. But you know somebody. You do. My sister has 1 child through IVF. She's had 3 abortions because of incomplete miscarriages. So do you want to sit here and be like, people are like, oh, anyone that's had more than 1 is a horrible person. Really? Because she would have died. So like, these are the conversations that make people think in nuance. And what has happened is Republicans are trying to put this as a dichotomous discussion. Life begins at conception, or you don't believe life begins at conception. That's an irrelevant argument to begin with, because the argument is bodily autonomy. The argument is not, when does life begin? Life is a continuation. An egg is alive. A sperm is alive. When they come together, they are still alive, right? My argument is not, when does life begin? I don't care. My argument is, you do not get to use somebody else's body to sustain another body. We have bodily autonomy. That is a ingrained human right. The UN has recognized that. United Nations has recognized that. The World Health Organization has recognized that. Both of those entities have come out speaking against the overturn of Roe and the Dobbs decision. I don't care when you think life begins. This is a bodily autonomy issue, and that is a distraction from the issue of bodily autonomy. But notice how they try to put this in dichotomous thought. Right? So anytime you're having an abortion discussion, I want you to notice if someone is trying to get you in dichotomous thought. This or that, this or that. This is a scientific healthcare issue. There is no dichotomous thought here. There is no black and white here. So that's kind of the first thing, is we know that abortion stories really tell something. The other thing is, I saw someone say in the chat, and you're absolutely right, Chris, that this affects everybody. So someone in the chat had said, well, it's in my state constitution. We put it in my state constitution that abortion is protected. Not when it goes to the Supreme Court, it's not. Not when they take this up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court overturned Roe and gave rights back to the states, supposedly. So Washington, Oregon, a lot of the states in like the Northeast that have enshrined it in their state constitution to say, you have this right. That will get overturned when and if and when the Supreme Court decides on fetal personhood. If this case goes to the Supreme Court, your state constitution isn't good anymore because it's overridden by the Supreme Court decision. If the Supreme Court decides that IUDs are no longer available because life begins at conception, that applies to the entire country. If Trump gets elected and he puts forth a 15 or 16 week abortion ban, I've heard both. I think 16 was the most recent claim. That applies to the entire country. I know, right? It applies to the entire country. So you are not safe. You're safe in your state right now. But as soon as they take this stuff federally, you're all screwed. So am I. So I'm in the boat with you. Like,
and I'll say one more thing and then I'll drop. I wanted to go on camera for this though. So I had an abortion. I don't regret it. It was the best thing for me at the time. I was not ready to be a parent. I was in a position where it was the most responsible decision I could make. This was a long time ago, and I don't regret it.
Good for you. I'm glad you were able to make that choice. Thanks for sharing that. And there's something I want to build on that. And Thanks, Chris, I'm gonna build on that, and I hope that's okay after they left. But I always think it's very interesting when people are like, well, you had sex, you got pregnant, now you have to be responsible. Abortion is a responsible choice. Abortion is being responsible. That is a responsible choice, just like parenting is a choice. And I'm cool with if you want to choose that choice. But when did we rebrand abortion as being irresponsible? That's not an irresponsible choice. If you know you don't have the capacity to care for a child, if you know your body can't handle it, pregnancy is not health neutral, y'all. And that's something I think that a lot of people, like our education system, does a really poor job. Pregnancy is not health neutral. It will always be more risky to be pregnant than to not be pregnant. Your blood volume almost doubles, and for some people doubles in pregnancy. That puts a huge strain on your heart. There's a large strain on your kidneys because it's filtering out additional stuff, right? Pregnancy is a strain on the body, and some people's bodies literally cannot handle it. Some people know they can't economically take care of a kid. Abortion is a responsible choice.
Tina, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, could you get maybe a little closer to the mic? It sounds like you're a little far away.
I'm on headphones. Just give me 1 second, please.
Oh, that sounds better. Whatever you just did sounds good.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Much better.
Much better.
Okay, so I guess I have like a clarification question because I missed this morning. So Alabama has said frozen embryos are people?
Correct.
And then all the other stuff are the what ifs that could come from that by creating that standard with the banter I've been hearing since I've been on, like I don't know. It's a lot. So it's just
go ahead,
it just
Tina.
covers the IVF.
No, so the overarching kind of like catch up, if anyone just got on and they're like, oh my gosh, I stepped into something and what the heck did I just step into? So Alabama made a ruling earlier this week. There was 3 couples that took a case to the Alabama Supreme Court, and the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that they took a damage to property lawsuit and a wrongful unaliving lawsuit up to the Supreme Court. And this was due to frozen embryos. These were 3 couples that were undergoing IVF. Those embryos became compromised. Somebody broke in, tried to steal them, and they were no longer viable. So they took that case to the Supreme Court of Alabama. Alabama ruled that life begins at conception, regardless of where that embryo is. So if it's a frozen embryo in a freezer, they're calling it an extrauterine child. So any embryo that exists anywhere is a child, an unborn child. And if it's outside the uterus, it's just an extrauterine child. And so
those are people?
Correct.
And then all the other stuff are the what ifs that could come from that by creating that standard with the banter I've been hearing since I've been on, like I don't know. It's a lot. I don't know. It's just
go ahead,
it just
Tina.
covers the IVF.
No, so the overarching kind of like catch up, if anyone just got on and they're like, oh my gosh, I stepped into something and what the heck did I just step into? So Alabama made a ruling earlier this week. There was 3 couples that took a case to the Alabama Supreme Court, and the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that they took a damage to property lawsuit and a wrongful unaliving lawsuit up to the Supreme Court. And this was due to frozen embryos. These were 3 couples that were undergoing IVF. Those embryos became compromised. Somebody broke in, tried to steal them, and they were no longer viable. So they took that case to the Supreme Court of Alabama. Alabama ruled that life begins at conception, regardless of where that embryo is. So if it's a frozen embryo in a freezer, they're calling it an extra-uterine child. So any embryo that exists anywhere is a child, an unborn child. And if it's outside the uterus, it's just an extra-uterine child. And so what we've been discussing is kind of the legal implications of that. What's going on in other states? Where's this going? Are they going to take this to other states? And then like, what can be the fallout if we declare fetal personhood?
So I also guess I don't understand IVF very well in the term. So embryo has a sperm implanted in it?
Yes. So an egg is like, a human egg.
Right.
And then there's various stages of development, but yes, an embryo. So in IVF, you take an egg, you take a sperm, and you put them together, and then those embryos get frozen until the person is ready to use it. So when they're ready to use it, they bring the embryo out. They thaw it in a very specific way, right? You're not just like thawing meat on the counter, but they thaw it in a very specific way. And then they take the embryo. So this is the IVF part. IVF stands for in vitro fertilization. And so then they take it and they put it up into the uterus. And the hope is that one of those embryos implants. They'll implant anywhere between like 1 to 3 usually. And the odds of IVF being success are actually pretty low. The odds of any of those embryos implanting are actually lower than you would want them to be, considering IVF is very, very expensive. So, and Jay was talking about like he did IVF. Jay, it's expensive. Like that's not cheap.
Yeah, it was not cheap.
Most people take out loans to do it. It's $10,000, $20,000.
Also not fun.
Excuse me, I had a phone call.
Not cheap and not fun. And
not cheap, not fun.
I mean, my mind is just blown. I can't. It's too much. Like I have 4 daughters, and they're having daughters now, and it's just like, what is happening and what's gonna happen? It's just too much. It's a
lot.
It's ridiculous. I don't understand.
It's definitely a lot.
Like I just can't. But I can't. My thoughts aren't together, so I don't really know what to say other than that. I just really wanted the clarification, and I appreciate that. And I also want to say to the guests before, thank you for sharing your story. That was brave.
And we need more of it. Like, I love when people want to share their stories so that way other people can see that, like, this is something that happens. People make these choices for a multitude of reasons. There are as many abortion stories as there are people that have had them because each one is very unique.
Yeah, like if you don't agree with abortion, don't have one. Like I don't get why people are in everybody's business like so personally like that. It's just it blows my mind. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think I thought, Danielle, that was such good advice when you said like share the story, because oftentimes like we're not willing to learn new things until sometimes we need an emotional attachment to it. Sometimes it is like somebody else's story that you care about and you recognize, oh my God, like this hurts real people. It's personified. Like I was adopted. I think my biological mom is here. I assume she is. And I told her today she might want to watch in, but she had that choice. She had the choice whether or not to go to school, or to finish out her pregnancy, and even though it was going to be adoption from the beginning. And on the other side of this, like seeing what women are going through now, seeing what specifically this was in the 80s, and she was in a very red state, so the ostracization that she would have had she had an abortion would have been massive. And she made a really, really difficult choice and like forever changed her body, forever changed her life. And we didn't know each other for 34 years. 34 years. I met her when I think when I was 34. No way to contact each other. She had a child that was gone that she thought I may never see that child again. And those types of stories, her sharing the story with me of how she had to make that decision, like that was impactful for me. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the power that you guys' stories have to change people's minds. It definitely changed mine. It softened my mind to the point now where now I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I think it's important for all of us to do whatever we can. But mostly I just feel, I just feel for you guys. I don't know what it's like to feel attacked just because of who I am or because of the body parts that I have. I'll probably never experience that unless you guys take over the world and exact your revenge.
We're trying.
Yeah.
We're doing our best. I do think, because you make an important point here, Jay, and I hope that we have some men like listening in the comments and stuff. I want y'all to share your abortion stories too. I really, really, really want men to show up and share their abortion stories. This is not a women's issue. This is not an AFAB issue. This is an everybody issue. Men benefit from abortion too. You watched Kate Cox. Kate Cox's husband watched his wife go through this. They both went through it together, sure, but he watched his wife basically be on the chopping block, right? When we ask for abortion stories, I have women show up over and over again and say, let me tell you your story. Where are my men? Why aren't y'all showing up? Show up and tell tell it on TikTok, because otherwise we're just women whining. We're just women who want to be irresponsible. We're just women who don't want to take accountability, right? But when you were watching your wife slowly unalive because her kidneys were failing, because she couldn't get the care that she needed, when you watched your wife go septic in a Catholic hospital because they refused to do anything until that heartbeat stopped, this stuff happened before Roe. The Catholic Christian hospital systems make up 1/3 of our hospital systems in the US. People weren't getting abortion care there. They were allowing people to go septic, sitting in an ICU until they would act. Where are your stories? Tell me about how your wife almost died in front of you. Tell me about how you watched the color drain from her, how much pain she was in. I want to hear from the men. I want to hear, and yeah, I do want to hear from the women. I want to hear how hard that was from you, but men don't give a shit. They don't care. They think that's just something that you take on when you get pregnant, right? I want to hear the men talk about how painful that was for you and how hard that was and how you had 2 kids sitting at home and you didn't know how you were going to do this by yourself, right? Because men will listen to that.
All right, Tina. Anything else?
No, thank you for bringing me up and getting the clarification.
Yeah, take care of yourself. Protect your
You
peace.
too, thanks.
All right. See you.
Thanks.
I don't know how to get out.
I got you, Tina. All right.
Jay kicked you out.
That's right. I got, is this Brandy? Yeah. Welcome.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Perfect. For some reason, I think I had my clicker on, and I think that it was impeding my hearing on my end.
I don't know what you're talking about with a clicker, Brandy. Nobody knows what you're talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not a clicker. It's a liquor.
It's not. Here we go. That's right. There we go.
I actually, I wanted to rewind the conversation because when I asked to join, you had just finished talking about coverture. And I had a question about that, or 2 actually. So you stated, Danielle, that coverture is something that is still in place today, and that's why we have the kind of issues that we're seeing right now in the court systems with rewinding women's or AFAB people's rights in general. Can you give me an example of something that is still in place that is part of coverture in regards to being married and the husband having rights over the wife?
Sure. So I don't know if I would say coverture is fully in place. What I said was we never did away with it, and we've chipped away at it. What we've done is slowly chipped away at it, right? We never went back. The Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, that's an amendment that's been trying to be passed since the 1970s, y'all. It says that women have equal rights under the Constitution. It has never passed. Women do not have equal rights under the Constitution. We have never passed the ERA. Never. The only right that is guaranteed to women in the Constitution is your right to vote. That's it. That's the only right that is guaranteed to you in the Constitution. We tried to pass the Equal Rights Amendment back in the 70s. They needed a certain percentage of states to sign on to it and agree to it. We didn't get it. Virginia became the last state we needed to tip it over, and they only joined in like the 2000s, like 2010 or something. But they put an arbitrary stopping block on this ERA amendment. So they said you have like 7 years to get all the states on board that you need. Well, that ended in like 1980, 83, something like that. And they never re-upped it. So now that we have all the states on board to do the ERA, it's dead in the water and it's never gone anywhere. So the only right you have is the right to vote. Everything else they've given to you, and you're supposed to say thank you and be grateful for it. So there's that. Virginia passed it in 2020. So y'all, it wasn't even that freaking long ago. It was only 4 years ago. Virginia was the last state. They weren't the last state we needed. They were the last number we needed. We needed like 2/3 of states on board. And in 2020, Virginia joined and said, we believe that women should have equal rights under the Constitution, but it's not gone anywhere, right? So we've chipped away at coverture. In 1978, we allowed women to have credit cards and get bank accounts. In 1993, we said that you can't grape your wife. How many people, and like poll for the comments, how many people have tried to get a hysterectomy and been told they can't, or tried to get sterilized, have their tube tied or something and told they can't unless their husband signs off on it? Or no, you're too young for that now. What if you meet a man in 10 years and he wants to have kids, so you can't get sterilized right now, right? So there's whole lists on, like there's someone on TikTok that's got a list of doctors that will sterilize you, that will give you a hysterectomy or tie your tubes without your husband's permission. We have that list. Right. Why do we have that list? Because the majority of them won't do it without your husband's permission.
Right. But that isn't necessarily a law either. It's just a preference.
Correct. That is correct. But that is based off of coverture, right? Why do we even have that idea in our brain to begin with, right?
Yeah, why is that,
because
why
of
is that
coverture.
an option for a doctor to
absolutely.
refuse? Yeah.
So that kind of goes back, like, so my second question is kind of moot then at that point, because it was relating to same-sex marriages and coverture. Mm-hmm. But if our court system is trying to rewind the clock, I imagine that's going to eventually be a target too, so it wouldn't even be a question.
If your question is like, who covers you when you get married to like a same sex? So like if I get married, I have an AFAB non-binary partner. If I get married to them, who is my coverture?
Right. Or who is the coverture in a same sex marriage? Because if it's, you know, if obviously you're the same sex, like who has superiority? You're equal in that.
Right. So that's a really great question. And because same-sex marriage wasn't a thing when coverture, like back in the 1800s, when coverture came over to the United States, that wasn't even something obviously that was considered. Same-sex marriage didn't become legal throughout the United States until 2015 with Obergefell v. Hodges, right? So that's only since 2015. They're definitely wanting to overturn same-sex marriage for sure.
Yeah.
But you were covered under your father beforehand. So like you were covertured under your father and then you were covertured under your husband. A lot of people don't have fathers these days either. So there's
Mine
that.
is
Like, so who covers you, right? Like where do we go with this?
Before I was married.
I think then it falls under finders keepers laws, I think is how that works.
Right. Now, often back in the day, the eldest male son, even if he was a child, would get the property.
Oh, I'm an only child too. All sorts of weird.
You're just fucking everything up, Brandy.
They don't know what to do with you, Brandy.
You're a problem.
I'm a heretic. Burn me at the. I'm a witch. Burn me at the.
You know what? You're
Don't
going to
joke
go to one
about
of those
that.
women's houses. They'll put you in one of those women's labor houses. You know, they'll be like, this woman doesn't have coverture. We don't know what to do with her. She goes to the women's labor house.
Goodness gracious. Boy. Well, I mean, if we do want to get back on path with where the conversation led since then, I do want to say thank you to Chris for sharing their story. But I'm happy to share mine as well if you guys want to hear it. I was late in the game to deciding whether or not I wanted to have kids. And then when I did want to have kids, I ended up having a miscarriage on my first child. And technically I had an abortion because I had a D&E to remove that. And then I had a successful second pregnancy. And then my third pregnancy before my last child, I also had a miscarriage and it was incomplete. They gave me the oral medication first, and then I had to have a D&E because it didn't clear everything after like 3 rounds of the medication.
Sorry, bird brain here. What's a D&E? I don't know what that means.
A D&E is Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Brandy.
You have the actual term. I was just going to say it's what they use now in lieu of the DNC. So it was like dilation and curettage or something before, and they use a different method now in the second part so that there's lower risk of uterine injury or something because the tool that they use has changed, I believe, is why the term has changed.
So they still do DNCs. Dilation and evacuation is the name of a D&E. There's not a fine line depending on when you do a DNC and a D&E. In general, DNEs tend to be done later for later term pregnancies. So a DNC is, with the D&E, they use like a vacuum. They use aspiration to get it out. And the DNC is kind of like a scooping it out. They're very, very similar procedures. In both procedures, you dilate the cervix, you go in and you remove what you had, Brandy, is what we call retained products of conception. So it's when someone has a miscarriage and then it's incomplete, just like what Brandy says, it's an incomplete miscarriage. So they have what we call retained products of conception. That's going to go septic. That cannot stay there. Absolutely not. It will go septic. You will not be well, right? Now, often what we do is we give the pill, right? We give mifepristone. I'm trying to decide what I can say here. But we give that. Now, people have that option. A lot of times people have that option, or they have the DNC option, or a D&E, depending on how far along you are. The pill can only be used up to 70 days gestation. So that's 10 weeks of pregnancy. Sometimes 11 weeks. There's some research that comes out right now that says we can use it through 11 weeks, but it's only FDA approved for up to 10 weeks, 70 days of gestation. If you're past that, you're going to have either a DNC or a D&E. Your doctor will decide which one of those procedures is best given your circumstances, because other people have tilted uteruses, right? People have scar tissue from endometriosis and things like that. So there's a lot of different reasons why a certain procedure will be done over another. But a D&E is a dilation and evacuation. So it's essentially removing the retained products of conception and cleaning the uterus so that way nothing goes septic.
That kind of makes me think that I was told something incorrect because my first time that I had it, it must have been a DNC because I opted not to do the pill. Mm-hmm. And I was technically over 13 weeks, but the measurements internally were measuring smaller. So like the fetal pole was measuring 6 weeks, 2 days, and the sac was measuring 9 weeks, and there was no heartbeat. And I was offered the pill option or the DNC option. And so I went with the second one because I didn't want to deal with like the cramping and all that. So I didn't even do the pill the first time because my doctor was in hospital. I was able to literally go in the next morning. It was just kind of circumstantially beneficial in my circumstance at that point. This last time I didn't have the option to do one or the other. I was like, I had to do the pill. And then because there was something that was still not coming out, they said the D&E, and I was again around the same time. It was like 13 weeks again, except for I actually ended up having a polyp internally. So they did do a DNC because they did have to scrape internally, but they called it a D&E. So like, that's really strange to me.
So I've heard a D&E also called a suction DNC. And if we're saying D, and the way that it's usually written out is like is that an ampersand? What is this weird and thing? Whatever this squiggly and thing is.
The and sign. That's what
the and sign. Yeah. So it's a D and C and a D and E. So it's not an N. D, N, C, D, N, E. It's not an N in the middle. So it's an and. Sometimes I think there's regional differences. Like the more I travel around the US, the more I think there's some regional differences in how we're describing these things and what we're calling them. But I have heard a D&E called a suction DNC before. They're extremely similar procedures.
Interesting. Yeah. So my first one was in California and my second was in North Carolina. So I can confirm regional differences for sure.
They're very similar procedures. So some people have used them interchangeably, and sometimes people don't remember which one they had, right? They're like, I remember I had this procedure, but I don't remember specifically which one it was, which is totally fine, because at the end of the day, the answer is you needed the procedure. It was necessary for your health, and you were able to access it. And that's the important thing.
Right. And that's what's crazy too, is because just like the woman in Texas, like these were obviously very much wanted pregnancies. I was very careful about keeping myself protected up until, I didn't have my first child until I was 30. So I'm almost 31. I made sure that I took precautions to make sure that I didn't get pregnant when I wasn't ready. And so these were definitely very much wanted pregnancies. And like, obviously, if we could have saved the pregnancy, that would have been ideal, but that's just not what happened. And that's terrifying. Like, there's all these people, and I've always been pro-choice, so that's never been like a question as far as whether or not I would terminate a pregnancy if necessary. But like the overall thought that I couldn't get the care that I needed with something like that inside me it's crazy, because like I said, that first miscarriage that I had, I don't know when that heartbeat stopped, because when I went and saw the doctor, I was supposed to be 10 weeks based on my LMP. When I got there, I was measuring 6 weeks in 1 day. So then I got to 13 weeks based on that measurement, not my LMP, because if it was based on my LMP, I would have been 18 weeks or close to 18 weeks at that point. But the fetal pole was still measuring 6 weeks, 2 days. So did it stop? Like, did the heartbeat stop the next day after the doctor's appointment, or did it just not grow and finally give out? Because had I not started bleeding, I would not have known. I could have gone
something was wrong.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known, because it was so early. Like, I wasn't, like, obviously not feeling kicks. I wasn't feeling any of that at that point. So there would have been no way for me to know anything was wrong until my next doctor's appointment, which they don't want to see you until, you reach beyond a certain point. You know what I mean? With that first appointment and the viability appointment and all the testing and all that stuff. So, I very well could have gone septic easily.
And I think you bring up a really great point, Brandy, that the way that we date pregnancies is not perfect, y'all. Like, it's not. You do the best you can. She's saying LMP. For anyone that doesn't know that means last menstrual period. So when you come into the doctor and they say, you're like, I'm pregnant, and they're like, when was your last menstrual period? You tell them, and that's how we calculate it until you have an ultrasound and we can start measuring stuff. Right? We go based off your word. That's how we calculate it. Most people don't have any idea the actual day they conceived. Some people do, right? Like, I was conceived on the 4th of July. Thank you very much. But most people do not. So we go based off of LMP, which is your last menstrual period. So then when you actually find out that you're pregnant, right? The day you find out that you're pregnant, you're technically 4 weeks pregnant already. Because we date it not off of the date of implantation, we date it off of the date of your last menstrual period and then move forward from there, right? So then when Brandy's like, well, it was measuring this and then they said this or blah, blah, it's really common to have I don't want to say misdiagnosed, but like a wrong timing, right? A wrong date for your pregnancy until we get an ultrasound. And then we get an ultrasound and we're like, actually, so we thought you were 12 weeks, but you're really 10 weeks. Okay, that's fine. Like, nothing wrong with that, right? It just means that at some point in that 4 week period, that's why it's plus or minus 4 weeks, right? Like, that's why at 37 weeks, I think it's 37, it might be 38, you're considered fully viable, right? That's a fully viable pregnancy. You're considered full term. You don't have to hit the 40 week mark. Why? Well, because there's a 4 week wiggle room in here that we're kind of unsure of. And another thing that's really common is that the embryo will stop developing at a certain point, right? So you will continue, the pregnancy will continue. A heartbeat doesn't actually form at 6 weeks. That's just a fetal pole of electrical activity, but we can see it on an ultrasound. So that might continue, right? Electrical activity might continue, but the embryo might not continue to develop in the way that's appropriate. So then when the doctor goes in and looks and says, you should be 10 weeks pregnant, but this is measuring like a 6-week pregnancy. I don't think your pregnancy is viable anymore. I don't think we're progressing, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a very common thing that happens, is like the pregnancy will progress, but the embryo will not progress.
Right. Yeah. So like there was no more electrical activity. I mean, at that point, it was like I said, if I hadn't have gone in, I probably could have gone septic, because I was bleeding, but there was nothing going on in there. It was literally just retained stuff.
Products.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
sorry if that sounds really insensitive, guys.
It does not.
It's called. Okay.
I'm in the medical field too. I feel like that's how I was able to kind of get through my miscarriages too, because like for the first one, I knew that like I got pregnant almost immediately after stopping birth control. So my body was like, hey, yeah, I'm ready. And then it was like, oh, wait, just kidding. You've been like having controlled cycles for 10 years and now we need to regulate ourselves here, lady. So it was kind of like one of those situations. I can recognize that. And with the second one, like I said, I had a polyp in my uterus, which was impacting the pregnancy because it was, I don't know, not allowing the placenta to properly adhere to my uterine walls, whatever it was. They were able to get it out, take care of it. My final pregnancy was successful, and I have our one and only girl out of 4 boys. So, I mean, that is both a blessing and terrifying with the state of things right now. But hopefully by the time she reaches an age where that's going to matter, we can have some appropriate legislation in place to kind of help protect women better than what we're doing now.
I appreciate you sharing your story, because I think it's important for people to hear these other aspects of abortion.
Right. And I think too, like, even though I know that a miscarriage is a spontaneous abortion, I think before getting more involved in like the language of abortion, I would have never associated myself as having an abortion, because that's like a dirty word in our culture right now. Mm-hmm. Like it means something to people that it's not actually meant to mean. And so I would never have associated myself that way, but like coming on here and listening to this, and obviously having been more involved since Roe v. Wade got overturned in 2020, I just like, it's wild to me, because my mother has had like actual pregnancy terminating abortions because she wasn't fit to continue carrying those in a plethora of ways, but like they were not the same as me. And so like I kind of always, maybe it was me pushing myself away from being associated with her choices in that and my choices in that.
That's fair. And I think, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, but either way, I think like it's okay. I think it's okay that she made those choices. I just knew for myself that wasn't something that I had done.
And I think it says a lot about like how abortion has been stigmatized in our country, and how the right has kind of co-opted this abortion language and the narrative surrounding abortion. Because just like you said, Brandy, like in the medical field, an abortion's an abortion. Like we don't say an elective of an abortion. We don't, when we're putting it in for insurance, it's an abortion. A D&C is an abortion. A D&E is an abortion, right? That's the way that it's termed. So I think it really says a lot. Like, I even hate the term elective abortion. I don't love that, right? Because, you know, it's not necessary to save somebody's life. But if you're telling a person that has 3 kids at home and they're already on food stamps and WIC and they're barely staying alive and they're working 2 jobs and they're like, I can't do this, who am I to say that's not a life-saving abortion, right? Like, that's none of my business. So I think it's really important that we get like all these nuanced discussions. And sorry, y'all, the military jets are flying yet again. But one of the other things that I want to point out, and Brandy, you can definitely speak to this if you want to. They get really loud, y'all. DNEs, DNCs, and taking mifepristone, taking the medication, it is not, people are like, oh, people are using this as birth control. It is painful, y'all. The pill is painful. It gives you horrific cramps, terrible cramp. Like, I've had people come to the ER sometimes, and that's one of the things that you need to know. abortion medication, they are tracking like how, when people come to the ER and they're like, oh, look at all of these complications that people have. People come to the ER because it's painful, because they're worried something's going wrong, because they're bleeding and they're like, is this normal? Is this amount of blood normal? Is this amount of cramping normal? I'm sweating. I'm terribly sweating. I have a fever. Is that normal? The answer is yes, it can be, right? But when you're not ready, when you've never done something like that before, the cramping is no joke. It is very, very painful. I have, like, to varying extents for everybody, right? Everyone has a different pain level. And the further along you are in pregnancy, the more cramping you're likely to have. But it is painful. And DNCs are not a cakewalk. You are put under anesthesia. It is a surgical procedure. It's an outpatient, but you are put under anesthesia. And then you wake up and you're sore and you're going to have bleeding for a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, depends on the person. These are not like, we're not going to the gym and walking out, right? Like, that's not what this is.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. I'd say I'm glad that I skipped that pill the first time, and I wish I had the option to skip it the second time, because I don't know if anybody's have had any kind of abdominal surgery, like their gallbladder removed, or even had a C-section, or had some kind of something where they had to do something laparoscopically and fill your abdomen up with gas. I would say that when you take that pill, like for me specifically, it was not only the cramping, but it gave me terrible gas. And it wasn't like farting gas. Like I wasn't walking around the house farting. Like it was just this buildup of internalized pressure that was pressing on other things on top of me cramping. And it was so uncomfortable, which leads to the sweating because it hurts. And you just like, there's nothing you can do because you took it. It's in there. It's doing its job. You just kind of have to power through. And I had to go through that 3 different doses of that. So I had to do it 3 different times before they're like, okay, we have to do a DNC or D&E, whatever they were calling it, to get the rest of whatever's in there out, because it's just not coming out. And it was because it was attached to a polyp. I mean, so that all 3 of like 2 out of 3 of those could have at least been avoided if they had just been like, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's go to the second option. But yeah, it's quite uncomfortable.
And I feel like that could have been avoided, like with better scans. And a lot of people, like most people will give you the choice between taking the pill or having a DNC. And so when they don't give that choice, I'm always like, what happened there? Was there a reasoning? During COVID, a lot of that, like, we used the pill a lot more because, you know, people weren't coming in to get procedures and that kind of stuff. But just like Brandy's saying, if anyone's ever had any kind of surgery on your abdomen, they use gas. So they essentially blow you up with gas. And the reason they do that is because everything's compacted and squished in, right? And I need to be able to see your uterus, or I need to be able to see your appendix, or whatever I'm doing surgery on, right? So they blow your abdomen up with gas, and what that does is expand this, and it gives us room to move. Now I can see stuff, right? Now I have a lot more space in there. Versus like, if you're just like this, everything's compacted. So if you see someone in surgery, their stomach's gonna go, and it's gonna blow up with gas, and that allows you to remove the appendix, do some kind of surgery like adhesions on the ovaries, things like that. You're not gonna fart that out because it's not in your digestive system. Right? Farts come from your digestive system, y'all.
For sure.
The gas will move itself out. Often people get pain up in their clavicle region because the gas does travel upwards. So if you've ever had like really intense pain under your clavicles, that's very common. The gas will move itself and move itself out of your body eventually, right? It will dissipate. For some people, it takes a couple days, and it is very uncomfortable in that time frame.
And the only reason that I can attest to the comparison of that feeling is because I ended up actually having to have a C-section with my daughter, and then 5 weeks later having to get my gallbladder removed. So so that was quite an adventurous 2 years. And that last miscarriage that I did have, where I had to do that 3 times, it was at the end of 2020. So it was definitely still in the midst of the strong arm of the pandemic. So that could potentially explain why they were trying to keep me out of the operating room. Because I did have to get a COVID test before I went in. Like, I came into the office and they did a snap test there, and then we went.
Fuck it. Let's just shove something in your nose too. You're gonna have a day anyways. Might as well.
Oh yeah. I had to push the nurse off me on that one. I have
Yeah,
like sensitive nostrils in general, and then them sticking those Q-tips up my nose. I'm like, yo, you're sticking in my brain.
Listen, I can just tell you, this conversation is effective. I can tell you that. Like, I didn't know any of this. This is so uncomfortable. I just want you to know this is effective conversation. If you can corner a man and make him listen to this, you may just win them over, because this is crazy. This is I have like the picture up of when we were looking at DNCs of the what's that tool called that they used for the hysteroscopy? Is that what you call it?
So are you talking about like an HSG?
I think that's what it's like.
A spoon with teeth on it?
No, this looks like a squirt, like a pump squirt. Like, I don't know how to explain what I'm looking at here, but
it could be the aspiration device.
Hysteroscope, it says.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's a scope to look inside the uterus.
Okay, yeah, that. All right. This is fucking wild. Yeah. This just blows apart. Well, I'm just thinking about like all the flippant remarks that are made by these Republicans. They're like, yeah, well, you're just going to have women getting abortions every other weekend. Like, they're just going to use it as birth control. No, like, it seems to me, tell me if I'm wrong, it seems to me that birth control isn't excruciatingly painful and makes you question whether or not you want to live. Right?
Birth control is not. Definitely say, like...
Yeah, for somebody to do this flippantly, that would be insane. Nobody would do that. Nobody would use abortions as birth control. That's insane.
Right. No. And I personally would rather go into a DNC than have to take that pill ever again. I mean, I don't plan on having any more children at this point, so hopefully that's not even something on the table for me. But end of day, the surgical option for me was much less traumatizing than that pill. And I do apologize for the graphic nature of my sharing, Jay, but I do also appreciate...
it needs to happen. Us men need to toughen the fuck up. It's fine. This should absolutely happen. Every man should be forced to sit and hear this, I think.
I appreciate you platforming this topic. I think that it's really important, among the other things that you obviously provide for us. But this is like a big top of the ticket issue, I think, for, hopefully half the population, but we know there's a lot of women who still kind of love resting in misogyny and the patriarchy. So we just need to share more, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want to take up anybody else's time. So if there's somebody else that has questions, I'll drop down. And I appreciate you, Danielle, coming on here and contributing to this conversation as well. And I hope you two have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Brandy. Danielle, I have like 15 more minutes. Do you have 15 more minutes?
Yeah, I can do 15 minutes.
All right, there's 4 people waiting to ask questions. So as we come up, can you just try and be as quick as you possibly can? I don't want to cut you off. I'll go a little longer if we have to, but let's try and be as quick as we can so all 4 can get their questions in.
Good morning.
Hello, welcome.
Hi.
Good morning.
I'm scared. He immediately smiled. Okay, so I do have a question. So if fetuses are now people, how could this potentially impact? Okay, and so how is it going to impact? This is 2 parts. Pregnancies that are deemed where the baby has a form of trisomy, or like Turner syndrome, or something along those lines. And the second part of this is, or I guess the question is, because you can't test for those things until after the limitations of the abortions. In a lot of cases, like genetic testing isn't available until well after the cutoff in a lot of states to be able to access an abortion. So kind of that direction.
Yeah. So one of the biggest concerns, sorry, y'all, I have to type some notes because I have ADHD. Otherwise I will lose everything people are saying. So one of the issues is the fetal anatomy scan that gets brought out very often. That happens somewhere, usually we say like the 20-week mark, but it happens somewhere between 18 to 22 weeks during pregnancy, right? That's the fetal anatomy scan. There's also something called an amniocentesis, which tests the amniotic fluid. That is not done on every pregnancy. The amniocentesis comes with a lot of risks that people generally are not recommended for an amniocentesis unless there is a problem, unless there's an issue that we're specifically looking for. Turner syndrome is one of those things that can only be diagnosed through testing the amniotic fluid. I believe trisomy can be seen on the fetal anatomy scan. So Turner syndrome is not necessarily a fatal abnormality, right? I went to school with somebody that had Turner syndrome. So then that begs the question, right? When do you have the right to terminate this pregnancy? Is it at the point of Turner syndrome? Is it at the point of Down syndrome? Is it at the point of trisomy 18, where you know that the fetus won't live more than a couple days? And the answer to that is you don't get any of it, right? Like, look at Texas. If we do fetal personhood, if you're saying, like the Alabama Supreme Court said, like the sanctity of life and you cannot destroy life, that means any and all life. So one of the things that Republicans are really pushing right now is something that they're calling perinatal hospice, which is like hospice care for infants. This is a real thing. It is a real thing. I support it fully for people that want it. I do not support it for people that are being forced into it, right? So I don't think there will be any exceptions for fetal abnormalities.
The reason that I'm questioning my aunt, I personally have not been in a position to have to make a decision like that. But my aunt's first pregnancy, she had Turner's. And by the time she was able to get in with, and granted, this was 30 years ago, so things have changed dramatically since then. But she was not able to get in with someone to verify the diagnosis, like, because she had to go to a specialist. Until she was past 20 weeks. And there were some timing issues with her appointments, but what had happened was she went in for her anatomy scan, and they realized that like one of the kidneys was half the size of the others, and there was no heart ventricle, and there was encephalitis, and there were all these things. And I know that there's a degree of severity when
for sure.
A whole bunch of these things. But if that had happened now, she would not have even had confirmation until way past what we're allowed, what the states are allowing for like pre-viability abortions or whatever. So does that make sense?
And it does. And one of the things that just like the Republicans are going after, if anyone doesn't know this, the Republicans are going after the abortion pill right now. So that case is going to be heard in front of the Supreme Court March 23rd, I think is the date. I can't quite remember. But I know it's mid-March. Don't worry. It's on my calendar somewhere. But they are potentially going to overturn using the abortion pill, which is over 50% of abortions in the United States are done using the abortion pill. That is often how we manage miscarriages as well, when people have retained products of conception. I fully believe that the Supreme Court is likely to overturn. I don't know for sure because we don't have any precedent. This is the first time that they have tried to do this, that they've tried to overturn an FDA ruling. Another thing that they're doing, because the mifepristone case was so successful and went to the Supreme Court, another thing that Republicans are now doing is trying to outlaw genetic testing in pregnancy. So now they're going after the FDA approval of certain genetic tests that have been approved in pregnancy. And they're saying the reason is because you can't confirm it. You can't for 100% tell this person that their baby has trisomy 18. You can only tell them to like a 98% certainty, right? So they're trying to outlaw genetic testing altogether. So very soon, if they're successful, you will not have the ability to get genetic testing in pregnancy.
Those babies. I'm going to hop down. Thanks for having me up, Jay. I appreciate it. And
thank you.
Thanks, Lego. That's crazy. Yeah, I think it was March 23rd. And now I left that page, but I looked it up. I think that was the right date. All right, Emma, and then Graciela, and then we'll need to go probably.
Hi, can you hear me?
You sound great.
I can.
Okay, so I want to start with saying that I live in a very conservative part of North Carolina. where abortion is not a heavily talked about topic, especially pro-choice. So my questions are mainly because I had a baby, and during my pregnancy, I was diagnosed with preeclampsia with severe features. And I also have something called von Willebrand's disease, so it's a bleeding disorder. And I would love to have my second baby, but pregnancy is a high-risk thing for me. And so basically, I just want to know, like, what is in the books for North Carolina, and what are some reliable sources that I can get more educated on this, just because because it's just not much of a conversation where I'm from, and how can we make a difference as individuals?
So right now in North Carolina, you are banned at 12 weeks of pregnancy, I believe. I'm doing this off the top of my head, y'all, but I'm pretty sure it's 12 weeks of pregnancy. One of the things that North Carolina is looking at doing is stopping travel for abortion. So South Carolina has also talked about that. I'm not going to lie, y'all, I get North and South Carolina mixed up all the time. But just in my brain, not on the map. But in terms of
on the top, yeah.
Yeah, just to be clear. But so they're trying to stop people from traveling out of the state. In North Carolina, you have Virginia really close by, right? So you can go to Virginia for an abortion. Virginia can be a purple state. So right now it's safe. I don't know what that's going to look like at some point in the future, but that's what they're trying to stop, is they're trying to stop travel. To what extent will they stop travel? I don't know, because we just heard Oklahoma say that even telling you about a clinic in Virginia is criminal conspiracy. So even just spoken word giving someone information, even as a healthcare provider, is criminal conspiracy. So if North Carolina starts to, again, remember these states borrow stuff from one another. So like Texas tries something, and that civil case in Texas where like you can sue someone for $10,000, they started there, but they were successful. So now that's present in several other states. So these states are copycatting each other, and we have the Alliance Defending Freedom Fund and the National Right for Life Committee that is giving them these trial legislations. And what they're doing is trying it in different states and seeing what's successful. And then when it's successful, there you go. You copy paste it to another state. One of the best places I think to get, and I'm going to look it up, the Center for Reproductive Rights, if you Google them and you Google abortion map, it should come up. Of course, it's not the first thing that comes up. It's like the third thing that comes up on my Google search, but you will be able to find a state map. They're not updated 100% all the time. I will fully tell you, because this is a changing landscape issue, right? But it's a good place to start. So Center for Reproductive Rights has a working map. I'm pretty sure if you just type in
Is that would it be the U.S. abortion laws map or the state constitution of abortion rights? The first
U.S.
one,
abortion laws map.
Okay, I see.
I'll drop that in the Discord, guys.
Also, the Guttmacher Institute I work with them heavily. If you Google Guttmacher, I'll spell that. Guttmacher. The Guttmacher Institute is one of our biggest institutes in the U.S. that researches sex ed, abortion care. They're the ones, them and the CDC, those are the two places that we get the abortion prevalence statistics. How many people are having abortion? The CDC measures that. So does Guttmacher. Guess who measures it more accurately? Guttmacher. So better than the CDC. If you Google Guttmacher and abortion map, it's also the third thing down on my list, and it's called an interactive map, U.S. abortion policies and access after Roe. That will give you a map, and they also tell you the last time they updated it. So it says January 24th, 2024, policies are current as of this date. So it's current as of a month ago. So they updated relatively recently, and you can click on it, and you can, like, I clicked on Colorado. Down there, it says protective. When I click on North Carolina, it says very restrictive. Abortion is banned at 12 weeks and later. Patients have to make 2 trips because there's a 72-hour waiting period. State Medicaid is banned. Look, we've got the Hyde Amendment. You're not going to be able to use Medicaid to get an abortion, y'all, until the Hyde Amendment is overturned. So it will tell you kind of a general overview of each state's abortion legislation. The maps don't say the same thing because each place kind of gets to put whatever they want on their own map. So if you go between the Center for Reproductive Rights and the Guttmacher Institute's map, you will be able to get a pretty good idea of what abortion looks like in your state.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful, and I will definitely look into both of those. And then I guess the last thing was I just kind of wanted to see, in your opinion, what is the best thing, like as individuals, that we can do to make a change for this?
So definitely having discussions with people. And I had said earlier, you may not have been here, but sharing abortion stories is really important. Research tells us that that's one of the best ways to start and have a conversation with somebody, because it's really easy for me to sit here and be like, oh, these people are so irresponsible. What idiots having abortion. But if I'm sitting right in front of you and I tell you that I had one and why I had one and my reasons, it's really hard for you to attack me as a person now. They may still do it, and that makes them an asshole. That's fine. That's on them, right? You can't control that other person's reaction. But we do know that sharing abortion stories is really important. And if anyone wasn't here before, men sharing abortion stories, please. We need more men sharing their abortion stories of like watching their partners go through it. And obviously the other answer is vote. Like locally, vote federally, vote at the state, vote at every level.
Okay, well, I appreciate you guys' time. I'm going to hop down, but thank you guys for what you're doing.
Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Emma.
All right, one more. You got time for one more, Danielle?
I do. I can do one more.
Okay. All right, Graciela, welcome back.
I'll be super quick. I wanted to talk about mifepristone for a second. You guys already mentioned it, but for states that have, like California, that has codified abortion, what effect will it be on that state if the Supreme Court agrees that the FDA overstepped their rights with that medication?
Can you say, like, so for in states where they have abortion protected,
Yes.
What will happen if the Supreme Court decides with them?
Yeah. Well, what if the Supreme Court decides that mifepristone needs to be pulled off the shelf?
You will not have access to that medication throughout the United States.
So that court case does, in fact, affect the entire country.
Yes.
And then what are the...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what alternatives?
What alternatives do we have?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a really great question. I paused to... So you can there's 2 medications involved in abortion, right? If anyone wants to look this up, you can really easily look it up. It's called mifepristone. I'm going to try to see what I can Google to get you some good information on it.
It's mifepristone.
So if you... Go.
Misoprostol and misoprostol. Wait, it's
misoprostol is the other one.
Yeah, that one they said causes women... it's not good at all when only taking that one medication, that it takes longer for a woman to heal from taking that, and they usually have to take more than one.
Yeah, so you usually have to take more than one of mifepristone. So that's the thing. There's definitely a regimen, like an abortion regimen that is taken in. Usually you take 4 pills in your cheek, and then depending on how far you are, we kind of go from there. And that's the protocol is different depending on everyone. So I don't want to give the whole protocol. So what they're going after is mifepristone. It's mifepristone, mifepristone. There are 2 medications used in abortion. One is misoprostol and mifepristone. Why do they sound the same, you guys? I don't know. It drives me insane. But try to lecture on this stuff all day and it will fuck you up. So mifepristone is what they're going after. You can do what we call a meso-only abortion. Misoprostol is the other name of the medication. It starts with MIS, prostol. That's why it's called a meso-only abortion. They are not as effective. They have higher rates of complications, such as retained products and needing a DNC. So it's much more effective to have the dual medication regimen. We could do meso-only abortions. That is a possibility. And some providers have said that they will continue to provide that. Some providers have said that they don't feel comfortable providing that. I think that the provider gets to decide. And I also think that each person has different risk levels, right? Given the pregnancy. So they get to decide that. The alternatives, if we do away with mifepristone, are a meso-only abortion, maybe, or DNCs. That's it. The procedure. Those are your only options past that. It's nuts. And
it's crazy because
it's
crazy because mifepristone has actually been found to be safer to take than Tylenol.
Much
and it's
safer.
been on the market for almost 24 years, and they are seriously considering taking it off the market.
We've never had an FDA approval be challenged like this before. Never. It's brand new. That's why I'm saying, like, there's no legal precedent to fall back on for this. And there's no way to look at this and be like, gee, I wonder which way they're going to go, other than we have an extremely conservative Supreme Court who we know is anti-abortion, right? But like, this has never happened before. A medication that the FDA approved over 20 years ago and that has been used safely. And by the way, isn't only used for abortion. It is used for other things. We've never had a political party from either side challenge the FDA approval like this. So if that does go through, those will be the remaining options. And like I said, over 50% of abortions in the US are now done by the pill. So that will eliminate a large chunk of access for people. And the other thing is, like, it's access in rural areas, right? Because you can get the abortion pill online. I want everybody to hear me right now. You can order it online. You do not need to be pregnant. You can order it now before they overturn it in March, and you can have it sitting at your house. There's an option for that when you order it. It says, are you pregnant now, or do you want to have it on hand? And you just click, I want to have it on hand. So just saying.
Do you know what the shelf life of that is, by chance?
A couple years. I think it's 3 years, something like that.
Best advice ever given.
Medication doesn't usually totally expire. It just gets less effective, and we tell you it expires. So it just gets less effective, and I don't recommend taking medication after its expiration date. But yes, I believe it's a 3-year shelf life. I will look that up for you, though. Just in case. But yeah, those will then be our only 5 years. It's actually longer than I thought it was. So it's good for 5 years.
Well done. Mifepristone.
So they're
Aid Access. Someone said, where do we order it? aidaccess.org. And yes, in March is the Supreme Court decision.
And then a decision by June, right?
Yeah. So they're going to hear it in March. We could have a decision anytime, right? Between now and then. But just like they do with everything else, they tend to wait till the end of session and then drop bombs on us. They did the same thing when they overturned Roe. They waited till June, and then they were like, here's this bomb. Peace out.
Can it be shipped to states that have a ban?
It can be shipped to states with a ban, yes. However, I feel legally obligated to tell you that you are taking on that risk, right? You are taking on that risk. Can it be shipped? Yes, it absolutely can. It will be shipped in a container that does not say what is inside of it. Perfect. It will be sent to you. aidaccess.org is the place. If you go to my TikTok, In Bed with Danielle, I have a link tree. I should have a link tree. Sometimes they remove it up there. And it has a link to all of that. It has a link to Aid Access and the places that you can order it online. It's about $150, something like that. There are ways that you can get help paying for it, right? With abortion funds and things like that. But it's about $150, and a doctor from a legal state, so like Washington, a doctor from Washington they'll ask you questions online. When was your last period? How far along do you believe your pregnancy is? Blah, blah, blah. If they feel like you need a telehealth appointment, they will give you a telehealth appointment. If they don't feel that you need to, if they think it's pretty straightforward, you'll just get an email that's like, thanks so much. We'll let you know when this has shipped. And a doctor in Washington will write the prescription, and a mail order pharmacy will mail you the prescription. If you are not in a banned state, it will come from a pharmacy closest to you. So I live in Florida. It will be written by the doctor in, let's say, Washington, and it'll come from a mail order pharmacy in Florida, because abortion is legal up to 15 weeks here. If you live in Texas, it's going to come from a pharmacy overseas. It's going to come from like the Philippines. It is the same medication. It has to be the same medication. It is the exact same medication, but they will send it from an overseas pharmacy. Yes, you can order it even if you can't get pregnant. You can have it for your bestie.
Thank you so much
yes,
for
Grandma
telling
can
everybody that. Because I think that a lot of women felt like when the Biden administration was able to keep the medication available to the states while we're in this interim period, that they felt like the mifepristone deal was just over. And it's so not over. So this year is
It's going to be a mess.
It's going to be an absolute mess. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kim in the Discord just said, guess what my nieces are getting for Christmas? I love that, Kim.
Yup.
Yeah.
They come in a little bottle because I've ordered it to show to people to be like, this is what I want to know, right? I want to be able to tell you what the process is like. So I've ordered it before just so I could tell people exactly what the process is like. It comes in a prescription bottle that has your name on it. It's a little bitty prescription bottle, and it will come with full instructions for how to use it. So depending on where you are in your pregnancy, right? So if you're like 7 weeks pregnant, you might only need 4 pills in the pouch of your cheeks, and you wait for them to dissolve. After 30 minutes, you drink water and you drink the rest of the pills, but you should wait for them to dissolve in your cheeks first, right? If you're further along in your pregnancy, they're probably going to tell you to take a second round of the medication several hours later, like 4 hours later or something like that. So depending on where you are, they're going to give you different answers, right? And you'll have different instructions. If you click, I'm not pregnant yet, but I want to have them on hand, they will send you the instructions and they will send you enough medication to have one abortion with.
Awesome. Well, look, I expected to have you for 30 or 40 minutes. You went above and beyond. I learned a lot, but I think just from the Discord and from the audience, it's an important conversation. But I think the takeaways for me is that I learned, number one, that us as men, we need to be involved as well. We either need to share the stories or create spaces where people can share those stories. And we should have those conversations with our friends, with our family, with our children. And two, the stories of the people who have actually dealt with it are so powerful. And I don't imagine a scenario where you can tell that story where very many people won't understand the impact of what we're talking about differently. I certainly, after today, understand the impact completely differently than when we started. So I can't thank you enough for donating your time. I know this is what you do. I would also recommend to everybody to follow Danielle, In Bed with Danielle. I think you have a big following, not only on TikTok, on Instagram, but your videos are so informative. That's why when I first reached out to you, that's what I love about your videos is they're energetic, they're quick, but you pack so much information in them. They're not just like, it's not just you sharing your opinion. It's you doing actual research, giving stuff that you can use, TikToks you can share with your friends that will make sense to everybody. You do an incredible job. The work you do is phenomenal. I'm a huge fan. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone. Everyone gave me really great questions. I appreciate it. Really quick in the chat, I saw someone, they want to know how far along can you take this medication? Look, I'm going to give you the real answer and then I'm going to give you the answer. The real answer is the FDA has approved this medication up to 70 days gestation, which is 10 weeks of pregnancy, right? That is 10 weeks from your last menstrual period, 70 days. However, we have very, very good research that says that it can be used through the 11th week of pregnancy. So many doctors, including Aid Access, will prescribe it up to 11, I think it's up to 11 weeks and 6 days, right? So we're not on the 12th week yet. So we're still hard in the first trimester, 11 weeks and 6 days. There is very, very good research to support the use of that medication up to that point. We just haven't had FDA approval of the medication up to that point. So the answer on paper is 70 days or 10 weeks. The answer in research is 11 weeks and 6 days. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Perfect. When you drop down, I'll finish up some stuff. Will you just make a comment when you drop down so people can follow you? I have gifts turned off so people can't click on your name. But thank you so much. I hope we get to do this again, but like as a celebration that some of this shit was overturned. That'd be awesome.
I hope so. I'll look forward to it. I'll bring wine that time.
Perfect. Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks, Jay. Bye.
Thank you guys so much. That was really informative, really impactful. I enjoyed every second of that. You can catch us every day, 8:30 a.m. to noon Pacific Standard Time right here on TikTok. I believe Felice will be back tomorrow. She was missed. I appreciate those that send donations. I didn't want to read the comments while Danielle was here, and I feel like we left on a good note. I'm going to read those out loud tomorrow. It doesn't feel right to be reading some of the comments are really funny. I don't really want to end on that note anyway. So make sure you guys are following Danielle, though. Do your part and be kind to each other. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. One last thing. Thank you, Jen. This replay will be on our YouTube. So for those who missed part of the conversation, you can always find the replays on our YouTube. That'll be up a little bit later tonight. If you need the link to the YouTube, that is in my link tree in my bio. If anybody needs an invite to the Discord, send myself or Jen a message, and we can get you a link to the Discord. Anything else? I'll check. Does anybody else have questions before I go? I'll watch the chat. Thank you, Jen. Her @ is in bed with Danielle. I think she dropped a comment in there. I don't know if she did yet or not. If not, if you didn't get it, go ahead and shoot me a DM, and I will just forward her account to you. So I'll make sure I'm watching my DMs. All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Take care of yourselves. Be happy if you can, and we'll see you.